So, I'm going to give you a bit of a preamble as to the actual campaign itself. Is called Extinction Curse. This is the first book. The show must go on, which basically the name of it in its entirety will become a bit more apparent momentarily when we begin. Oh, I heard you.
Oh, I heard something. You're very quiet.
You can hear me though.
We can hear you.
Yes, I can hear
We
you.
have
Oh, brilliant.
progress.
I'm just going to turn my sound up. That's what I'm going to do.
Good. Okay. I don't believe I've got any other access to. I don't believe I can do anything else from the microphone.
It's absolutely fine. I'm just turning you up.
No, we can hear you. That's a significant improvement over the last 10 seconds.
Which was
Good. Well,
absolutely
it's
fine.
lovely to see you all. Brilliant, double brilliant.
All right. So you haven't really missed anything, as we had, or I had, severe technical issues with trying to get the stream to work. Everything worked yesterday, then today nothing. So there hasn't really been anything. The only thing we've done is identify at this point, John, where we are taking part in this campaign, which hopefully it should have dragged you to now, which is the region of Absalom, which is the Isle of Kortos, set on its own in the middle of the inner sea. The island itself, I can give you a bit more information about that, is quite similar to Australia, except for the orcs and the other strange creatures that live on there. They're equally as deadly. Equally as they eat Vegemite. That is the pure diet of Absalom. However, it is very similar that everything, sort of terms of civilization, is based around the coast. There's a lot of desert and sort of untraversable areas within sort of more the centre. There's few mountainous regions. There is even almost like a tiny little New Zealand, which is the Isle of Erin, which is where we will begin our game. I don't know how organically you want to sort of introduce your characters, whether you want to do a little bit first, or if I can do the preamble to sort of set the scene and then we can introduce you.
It's up to you. I mean, I'm happy to just, go through my character and description, and then you put us in the scene, or if you'd rather it the other way around, feel free. It's up to you, man.
Oh, I don't like choices. It's painful. So if we just get a quick overview of the class and the character name, then when sort of I reveal you as being there, you can introduce what you look like.
Yeah, brilliant. I'll go first, shall I? I'll go first.
You go first.
So, my character name is Asha, as we were just discussing, and she is a sorceress of the angelic bloodline.
Okay. And Zonk.
Yes, my character is Zonk Nine Lives. He's a goblin and a rogue. A little bit of a thief. But he's friendly though.
Yeah. And, which is much in line with all the revelations for Dungeons and Dragons, where they've now finally removed races. So there we go. We're on the right side with goblins taking part. Zeke, or Jim, I should say.
Well, I'm a ranger, and the name's Jim.
Jim the Ranger. And then we have Reynard, who is
Yeah, so Reynard is a fighter. So Reynard Van Prouse, that's the Diabell Van Prouses, not the Atari Van Prouses. Yeah, so Reynard Van Prouse is a fighter, noble born. I'll tell you all about him when it comes up.
Okay. We are going to sort of transport ourselves to the big top. So, in terms of, and I take you all there, and I forget to send myself. There we go. So we've arrived at the big top, which is quite a sizable map, as you might realise, given the fact we're still at 60%, and you can see the player characters right at the top are tiny. It's huge as a map. Oh, don't tell me that Zeke now can't hear John.
Mate, hear a word of what he said.
Okay, you might, if you go to the settings wheel, we were so close! Settings wheel, and scroll down and try reconnecting to the chat. It might fix it. So, we are here at the Circus of Wayward Wanderers, which You,
I'm
you're.
just gonna do the same. Hang on.
Could you not hear John either? Everyone's refreshing.
It's because suddenly some of the nameplates are like all over each other.
Nah.
I'm having that as well. Yeah.
Is that better? Does that work? So, oh, I might have to just leave them as they are. Not really revealing anything too grand about yourselves with bizarre and strange names. I don't know why Luke's always takes the longest to reconnect. Everyone else is like, boom, done. Yeah, we did have some, you know, some rather lovely music to play, which is now obsolete because I can't actually. Or can I? Although I've moved it all, and I have no idea where to.
Hello.
Hello. Are you back?
I've lost the background image, but
The background image,
whatever.
Map.
the map.
Yeah, we only see a black.
Oh,
box.
okay. So it's for some reason decided to put dynamic lighting on. Maybe.
I'm going to open up our Twitch screen.
No, it's not. Fog of War's off. So currently you can't see anything.
We can see it now. I can see it now.
Okay, it might just be take a while. It's a very large map, so in terms of data, it takes a little while to load potentially.
Oh yeah, I see the characters.
Yeah,
Oh, there we go. I can hear everyone now.
cool. So has everyone got the map loaded? It will. Some of these will take a while because they are huge, as you might see from the size of the circus tent
Yeah, it
itself.
took its time, but yeah, I've got it.
You got
loaded.
there. Cool.
It does take a while.
Yeah. So you are all within the tent itself, and you are all currently stood around waiting for the first performance in the Isle of Erin that you are taking part. The Circus of Wayward Wonders is a collaboration of different troops. Primarily, a lot of them have come from the Celestial Menagerie, including Zonk himself was originally part of this other circus, which had less morale and ethical treatment of its show staff, shall we say, and many of the people, including the prime person. I've moved too many things around and I've now lost my name list. Sorry, so Myron Thunder Stendhal, the ringmaster, the owner, shall we say, of the Circus of Wayward Wanderers. He is the instigator that brought you Zonk, as well as many of the other people with him, to create his own circus. And tonight is the first in a long line, he hopes, of successful shows. So the Circus of Wayward Wanderers performs in an enormous tent capable of holding hundreds of people, and that's a good thing, as it seems the entire population of Abberton has turned out for the show that you are putting on tonight. Many of the town's most prominent citizens, including in fact the mayor, are among the throng jostling for seats, peering at the three rings that fill the centre of the tent and waiting excitedly for the show itself to begin. As the lights go down and the audience settles into their seats, the circus performers begin to take their places backstage, awaiting their cues. Myron normally gives us sort of an introduction and allows them to come out to begin their performance. However, suddenly several of the performers closest to the curtain that separates the rings from the backstage area leave their assignments, gathering in a small circle and a crowd exchanging frightened whispers and hushed gasps. Amid the group, a contorted body caught forever in the throes of terrible pain, is the corpse of ringmaster Myron Thunder Stendhal. Everyone in the circus knew Myron for his amazingly powerful voice that could bring instant silence to the largest crowd, and knew everything there is to know about putting on a successful performance. Now he's dead, but the crowd is still out there, and they're expecting a show. And at this moment, we are sort of slightly out the backstage, and I'll move you to the area you are in. but you can all see crowding over towards one side is the group as described, sort of huddling over, hushed whispers, sort of panicked voices, but trying to not obviously scream out loud and let the rather large awaiting fans in on the secret that you have stumbled upon. How do you react?
Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is terrible. But we must go on. We must go on. But a mere hiccup. A mere hiccup. Someone. Let's move him out the way. We need this. We need this body out the way. Time to investigate later. Investigate later. The crowds are so looking forward to us. The crowds. They're out there. They're what we play for. But for now, this is just this is an inconvenience. Nothing more than an inconvenience. One of you, take this away. Let's move his body. I know, it's an emotional time. The crowds do that to us. But come on, the show must go on. The show must go on.
In response to that, you notice, and you would be having travelled with these individuals for quite a long time, the rather interesting performers that the Everyday Miracle Troupe. Gideon Elbus, the rather large strongman who has his own rather ornate beard as well, sort of steps forward first. Gunnar, the awakened dog, sort of steps forward, not really too sure what he can do to help. And the tattooed miracle, Shawanti, tribesman who's come and left and joined on some form of mission that she hasn't really revealed, sort of step towards the body. One man sort of turns to you, and he himself, as quite a considerably older gentleman of human descent, his hair slicked back, a cloak adorning his body, and sort of simple red robes, turns to you and says, "Well," in a hushed tone, I guess we have to go on, but some compassion, sir. May be nice. The others aren't used to this sort of inconvenience and death, as you would sort of put it, but I do believe the show must go on. Should I send in the clowns?
The clowns, yes, a wonderful idea. Let me go out there first, reassure the crowd, really get them going, and then send in the crowd. Just then send in the crowds, only after.
Well, as great an idea as that is, I know you have visions of sort of taking over when Myron retired, but we haven't really got a running order, so if you go out there to announce, I'm not really too sure who you're going to announce at the moment. It appears Myron forgot to write it down.
Right, so clowns. So we have the clowns, the miracle workers, yes, we have the miracles, they'll follow afterwards, and maybe let's round off with the strongman. It's our least best performance, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the clowns are more just to sort of cover up mishaps, and the strongman is not really that strong.
I know.
We do have multiple acts. You know, the Flamboni sisters, their fire tricks are rather impressive. We have the Kambali family, the Featherfall Five. They're rather agile and adept at sort of their trapeze. We have Mordain, the magician. She's brilliant at escaping. Axel, he's an untested one. Myron never really gave him a shot. But we don't know. He might work. We have the Dwarven Throwers. We have Eliza and Mr. Tickles, her snake. He turns finally and points towards Zonk. And I believe the little goblin's been working on a trick as well.
Yeah, Zonk looks up at that and he smiles, a big smile. Yeah, let me go last. I'm the big finish. I know I am. Please let me go last.
Oh, fantastic, Zonk. That would be a brilliant way to finish the show. Brilliant, Zonk. I knew we could rely on you. Right then, Flamboni sisters, you're up.
and they sort of turn to you and both sort of nod, and sort of are kitted out in this red flaming kit that sort of emulates obviously what their own actual act is. One of the other crew that you recognise to be Mordain in a slick, almost sort of ball gown sort of esque style. If you've seen the latest Disney Maleficent, sort of in that elegant sort of over the top, clearly believes herself to be a bit better than the show itself, steps forward. Well, I do hope that you're putting me in the final act. You know, I know there are 3 rings and we need 3 final acts, but you can't possibly think not to have me as one of them. I mean, if you're letting the goblin be one.
Who was that said that?
That was Mordain, the magician.
Well, Mordain, you are tried and tested. You are tried and tested. You'll be the second act. The rest of us, well, we're just going to have to work the crowd, aren't we? Work the crowd. Right, Flambonian Sisters, line up behind me. I'll introduce you. Right, ready? Ready?
Do you realise we need 7 acts, don't you? We can send the Flamboni Sisters out as the starting act, absolutely. But we will need another act for the final and 2 acts to go in the middle.
Yes, Flamboni Sisters, then the Featherfall 5, Mordain in the middle. Axel, we're going to give you a chance this time.
He
Draw the throwers.
stands up tall, beaming, like genuinely, and is now in awe of you. You can see sort of just this instant love as you've finally given him this chance he's been waiting for. He looks almost like your traditional sort of what you'd expect in Las Vegas showmanship, with the tall top hat from, you know, Victorian time, not modern, the cape and everything else, and laying in his hand is one singular pigeon at the moment. Oh, thank you. You won't forget this. Nothing will go wrong at all. It's absolutely fine. So I'm in the second act. Brilliant. I'll get everything together. Excellent. Well, we've still got the Dwarven Throwers, I believe. Are they going to go in the final or in the middle? We've also got Eliza and Mr. Tickles.
Yes, final act, Dwarven Throwers, Elijah and Mr. Tickles, and Zonk for our showpiece.
Excellent. You haven't forgotten our agreement, Mordain speaks up. I'm in the final act, I believe, alongside this goblin.
Oh, Mordain, yes. Dwarven Throwers, you're in first act, yes. Swap with Mordain, you're last.
And at this point, the professor leans in towards Reynard and says, I hope you know what you've stepped into. It's what you've clearly wanted, but you seem a bit exasperated, sir.
Oh, Myron here. Come on, the show, the crowd, you can hear them.
At that moment, the clown troupe sort of come cartwheeling back in. Sort of, they look almost exhausted, sort of having been out there. This has taken a couple of minutes to sort, and the crowd, you can hear them going, "Bring on the show! Bring on the show!" And the clowns are like, "We tried. Yes, they're clearly not a flower bunch, and Earl's balloons didn't quite. Well, they did pop. That was the problem. Anyway, and they sort of disappear off, and you are, as Reynard, more than welcome to take the stage.
Yep. So the Flamboni Sisters, Featherfall 5, and the Dwarven Throwers line up behind me. I enter the centre of the stage, clapping. Ladies and gentlemen, dwarves. Ladies and gentlemen, and dwarves, welcome to the show you've been promised, the show you've been waiting for. We have for you the best show that you could possibly find around here. What a show we've got for you. And without further ado, onward. The exit.
And with that, the Flamboni Sisters themselves begin to make their way out onto the stage, taking centre ring. They sort of stick their hands up, asking for quiet, and instantly out of their sort of pockets, and igniting as they do, these fiery poi appear on the end of these long chains, and they begin to do some dances and twirling, and I get to, for the first time ever, make the first roll. to see how oh dear. So we're starting off really well. So they go to start their trick, and you can guess as to what on earth I just rolled. They attempted to deceive the people by these poi as they whip past and they twirl around their head. They turn to each other, and one of the Flamboni sisters turns and tries to whip it very quickly past the head of the other. Glamara would be her name, and unfortunately the deafness in her wrist isn't quite quick enough, and she brings it down just as her sister Swenje lifts her nose up and catches across her face. It sends this poi into a tumble, catching down towards her body, and she attempts to try to put the fire out with her action, because this all runs in terms of the encounter mode. You get 3 actions, so unfortunately she's not doing so great. Luckily, with a natural 17 on the dice, she manages to avoid igniting herself completely, and very quickly manages to douse the flames, and they almost managed to make it look like it was intentional. In the crowd themselves, several of them sort of start speaking and looking at each other, and are quite enamoured by this, where it looked as though everything was tragic. Quite quickly, the Flamboni sisters come to an end, and they come out, and as they do, Swenja is sort of in a language that's unfamiliar to any of you. It seems to be almost regional, almost twin-like in its sort of nature, some sort of what we would call Pig Latin, where it is just a nonsense language, and they sort of stumble off. The professor goes over to them. Oh, good show, yes. He then turns back to Myron. Myron, are you going to go out and announce Axel next? He's who you've said is going to be next.
Yes. Featherfall 5, you're next. Featherfall 5, Swords and Throwers, Axel afterwards. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Brilliant. Out you go. Where are I have to genuinely sing the Brimfall of Asher every time. Where is Asher and Jim at this point?
So, Asher's being quite, she's being quite aloof. She's not interested in the hubbub that's going around her. But she turns to, who's next to her? She'll turn to the person next to her and she'll say, do you think he'll miss his knuckle bones if I take them?
Is that to one of the other performers or one of the player characters?
Whoever is closest.
That's fair enough. At that point, you'd have actually the youngest, as they go to head forwards. You see Solongo, Kanbali walk past you and sort of look up at you, and as you know, they are quite the children of the circus, quite enamoured by you, or at least the youngers are. Trying to find a thing that I've put down. I can't find it now. Sort of turns to look at you with a bit of fear and awe in his eye, and Cavitero, the father of the troupe, turns and says, "Don't listen to the Reaper. Carry on." And sort of the child instantly is just snapped out of this and starts to run to catch up to the family. As they go out, though, they turn to Jim, and the Fatuma, the mother of the troupe, turns and says, "Jim, you're fairly good with animals. The nets, they don't look right. They I can see them putting them up, and they don't look right." So at this point, if you want to go and have a look at the nets, I can give you a suggestion of sort of what sort of thing you might be able to roll, or anything like that, if there's anything you want to do, or you can just ignore the woman.
Where are the nets?
So the nets are literally being taken out. They're being taken out past you at the moment, being literally ready to be lifted up to act as the safety net underneath the Featherfall 5, the Kambali family.
Okay. I'll just once over check.
Okay, you can either do a perception or a nature check, whichever you feel is stronger.
Press perception, perhaps.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
D20 plus your perception.
Still weirds me out. The perception is on the offense tab
Yeah.
rather than in the skills tab.
Try refreshing your chat, Claudio.
You might have to refresh, I'm afraid.
Have you managed to do a roll, Zeke? It's a D20 plus 6 for you.
Oh wait, hold on. I got in.
Was that 18?
So, 19.
19. Okay, so as you see the nets going past you, ready to be put up,
Yeah.
you notice that they seem to be chewed, and actually, given the fact that you've managed to look quite closely at them, you notice that actually screaming children seem to have appeared. You notice that they seem to have been gnawed at by an animal, a very small animal, and it seems almost intentional. What do you do with this information?
Go hunt for them.
Okay, so Fatuma, as you go to sort of walk away, are they okay? Is there? You seem to stare at them from a long time. Jim, should we be performing? Is there something wrong with the nets?
I'll tell her that there's holes in them.
And with that, her face goes pale, and
They've been gnawed at.
she turns to Cavatero and says, "Darling, we can't possibly go out. You need to go and tell that Reynard we're not going. We're not performing without our net."
Maybe Zonk can help. Maybe I check ropes. Yes.
If you think you can, and at this point, if you want to do a diplomacy check, you can do to try and convince them to perform, or that the nets will hold them, or anything in terms of that.
Okay, I rolled a 19 on the diplomacy check.
Okay, so Cavatero and Fatuma look down at you, the three children sort of looking round, ready to go out. At this point, Reynard himself is out in the ring, sort of, I assume, looking back, wondering where the Featherfall 5 are.
Yes, the Featherfall 5. You've heard of them, and he turns around and he's like, he's got his signalling to
Yeah.
the Kurt. There's got to be someone.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
He's picking them up. Featherfall 5. The best of the trapeze artists and skyward artists you've ever seen. On their way, and he's placating the crowd as best he can, without the bloody clowns.
Good. Yeah. So again, as the family can see, and sort of with Zonk telling them that it's all going to be okay, they sort of seem a little bit calmed by this, and also slightly less worried, given that. Which reduced the actual DC for this, because Jim was honest and told them that it seemed to be some kind of creature that had gnawed at it, and not anyone that sabotaged. So they turn to each other and say, "Darling, we've practiced. We'll be fine. I'm sure if one of us falls, that the nets will catch us." And the nets are escorted out and very quickly put up, and they go out to do their trick as Cavatero comes out and nods toward Myron, sort of indicating they're ready. And not Myron, sorry. I've got too many names in front of me. Reynard, to indicate they're ready, who I assume bows and lets them take centre stage, unless he has anything to...
Myron's reaction is a little bit more sedate.
Yeah, he said nothing. He said absolutely nothing. Okay, so they go to they go up to take their positions. Asher, I'm going to, as you haven't had the chance as yet, and we'll let Reynard as John take a turn. Can you roll for me a d20, and we'll just see how well they perform this trick.
I rolled an 18.
You have critically succeeded in this
my
check, giving them a 26. As they sort of climb up into the rigging and the poles and sort of position themselves up. First of all, the father jumps out, grabbing hold of the trapeze. From the other side, his wife leaps an almost impossible distance, and there is that moment of silence as she grabs hold of his ankles. The next child comes swinging out. The father's reached out. He's holding on and is holding his wife purely by his ankles, grabs one of his children, flings him round onto the next trapeze as one of the other children at the same moment has already launched themselves into the air, and the child grabbing hold of this trapeze grabs hold of their sibling, and it's just this utter what would appear like carnage, but is just this well-rehearsed and well-timed show. And the crowd are just astonished, and that silence, as soon as everything is pulled off and these family are flipping and flying around the trapeze, the crowd just erupts into this roar. Because it's been quite successful, the family sort of line up once they finish this first trick and start discussing. They have the opportunity to do a second trick. They look down towards Reynard, who sort of stood, I assume, to one side, keeping an eye on how the crowd are reacting. They look down to you as to whether they should continue or end on a high.
They end on a high.
They're going to end on their high. So they graciously bow and tumble back down the posts and slide round the ropes and sort of, to a very large applause, take their exit, having felt very successful, especially considering the potential injuries they could have suffered had they failed. As they come back out, they all congratulate each other. Cavatero turns to Zonk and says, "Thank you for convincing us to go out. It's the best we've ever been. It's amazing. It's been worth all our effort. Thank you."
No problem. Sometimes you just have to trust the rope.
At that moment, the whole netting just falls to the ground. No. At that moment, you see Axel, and he's got his hat in hand, and he's very aware that he is next to go out, and he's wringing it in between his hands, and you can see him muttering into himself. Aisha and Jim's obviously gone off to go and investigate to do with these rats. Zonk and Aisha, who are still there, you can see this very, very nervous looking Axel muttering to himself. At this point, obviously not Myron because he's dead, but Reynard will be preparing to announce Axel, known as Axel the Unproven. Okay, so
Can I actually?
Oh, sorry, yeah, no.
Before the next bit, can I make I was going to say medicine check, but it's not called that, is it? It is called that.
it is called that. It is in this,
Yeah.
yes.
Can I do a medicine check on the guy that I'm obviously examining currently?
Myron,
To see cause of death.
you can. Yeah, roll medicine check for me.
Sure. Yep. So I get a +4 to my roll. I rolled a 13. So 17.
Oh, okay. 13 was on the nail, but with the 17, you are quite able to notice these two. After pulling up the, this obviously takes quite a bit of time, so you're out of action for most of the rest of the performance doing this. You notice after examining the body, you find just above the ankle of his right leg these two. At first, you think pinpricks, but as you sort of think about it, you would reckon they look more like a snake bite, and you can see coursing outwards from the wound clearly is the poison that sort of is what has brought this man down and killed him.
Okay. And whilst I make this check, seeing that, I will retain some of the poison in a vial. If that's okay.
Yep. Do you have nature?
I do.
You can do a subsequent nature check as well if you like.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah, so that's +4. I rolled a 12, so that's 16 in total.
You know that these are the bite of a viper. You would also know that it is very uncharacteristic of these sort of vipers to attack or do this sort of action without some kind of provocation. And we'll come back to you in a moment. Zonk, you are now the only one that can see Axel stood there wringing his hands, and you get the impression he's now suffering from stage fright, as he's being called onto the stage by Reynard, who's possibly less enjoying his position of ringleader power, and he's sort of repeating himself, I can't go on, I can't, what if it goes wrong, what if it goes wrong, Myron never believed in me, Myron never gave me a chance. What would you like to do to try and impress upon Axel the need to perform?
I try to cheer him on from the sidelines.
Yeah.
Like, get on, mate, you can do it. Whatever you do.
Okay, I would go for a diplomacy check.
So this is a 6, so that's 12.
Unfortunately, it doesn't quite go to plan, and although your intent is meaning well, he's... No, I can't go on. I can't do it. I can't. And he runs away from the stage and disappears out the back of the tent. Zonk, at this point, you are quite clearly aware that the next act has disappeared that is meant to go on. Something needs to be done to find a replacement.
If I look around me, are there other performers who aren't in the line who are potentially up for replacing Axel?
At this point, the only other people that you can put on at this point are the dwarven throwers to buy you some time, or you can convince Reynard, who is stood, I assume, fairly near the curtain. You might want to whisper to him there's been some technical problem, and then we can look into, is there anyone else as a performer? Currently, there isn't anyone else around. The only people there are everyone else ready, queued up to go.
So I give Reynard a look, like I shrug with my shoulders, and I point at the dwarves. I stroke, like, the beards, send in the beards.
Send in the beards. Yeah, so there is the bearded lady and the bearded man. They can be got. They're not there at the moment. They've gone off. So literally the only performers that you've got are the dwarven throwers, Mordain, and yourself. As Axel has unfortunately done a runner.
There should be a Lisa and Mr. Tickles, right?
Oh, there is. Sorry. Yes.
Yep.
That is also the other one that is in the final 3.
And what can Reynard? Can Reynard see Zonk through the?
Yeah, he's sort of leaning, I assume, outwards, and you're sort of waiting for the next act to appear, having sort of announced Axel the Unproven. You know, Myron never believed in him. I believe he should deserve a chance. You turn, and Axel is nowhere to be seen.
Okay, well, Reynard can see Zonk through the curtain. Axel's not there, so Reynard makes a decision. Ladies and gentlemen, well, as you can see, Axel the Unproven will remain unproven. And we're going to save our very special act for the final. Well, I think we're all anticipating the great Zonk 9 lives. Ladies and gentlemen, get yourselves ready. Instead of the finale at the end, we're going to have it in the middle. And I want to make that diplomacy check to see if he's been able to hype the crowd.
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't think I have anything for this.
You whatever your diplomacy.
Oh yeah,
is
so it's a roll of 6 with diplomacy. Force was a 10.
A 10.
They were already excited.
They're already pretty excited. There's there's no extra sort of, even with your build up, there's nothing that sort of makes them sort of expect any more from Zonk. They're sort of, oh, okay, he's coming on now. That's good. We were looking forward to seeing him. And sort of you can hear some chatter of people sort of going, oh, that's good. Yeah, no. Well, I wonder what they're going to put in the end to make up for it.
So we beckon Zonk through and heads off. Pat Zonk on the shoulder as he as they pass at the curtain.
Cool. Okay, so Claudio, Zonk, would you like to describe what you're going to do in terms of your trick?
Yeah, so Zonk runs out a bit enthusiastic on all fours with his tail wisping behind him, and then he gets on his legs, stands up, he puts his arm up, he greets the crowd, and then he climbs up one of the poles, and he gets on this really narrow tightrope that is strung between two poles at an angle, at an incline, and he starts maneuvering slowly from one pole to the other. He does so a bit hesitantly, and you can see constantly using his tail to keep his balance better. And then when he returns, at a certain point in the middle of the rope, he hesitates again. It seems that he loses his balance.
At this point, can we have your acrobatics check to see how much you... it's acrobatics, isn't it?
Okay, so I rolled a 5. I don't know if we have our hero points already.
Well, you do. You have 1 at the start of every session.
So I'm going to use a hero point for this one.
Okay, are you going to use it to do the re-roll?
Yes. And I roll a 15, so that's a 22 in total.
That's... Yep, so that takes you from a fail into a success.
So Zonk falls off the rope, seemingly dropping to the ground, hands first, and then suddenly he grabs onto the rope with his tail, swings to the other side, and lands on the rope again, and finishes his walk.
Excellent. So that is your first trick there. You've still got 2 more actions. Much like in combat, these will take the -5 and the -10 penalty. Mm-hmm. Or you can sort of end there with your success and sort of head off.
Dun, 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 dun. Well, I think I'm going to head off and while I'm still successful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take the risk. If I look at the crowd, do they seem impressed? Or
you do as you look. Well, if you give me a perception check.
Mm-hmm. That's 15.
So from your vantage point, you do see people look around and sort of you can see them muttering and talking. There are a couple of 3 people in fact that you notice moving around through the crowd, and they're actually sort of almost as whenever there's a lull in the volume from the crowd cheering your success, and sort of they're sort of surprised that it looked like he was falling, he was going to go down, oh he didn't fall, oh that tail's quite useful on a goblin. You can hear them sort of calling out sort of quite sneeringly, quite cruelly in some ways, oh the Featherfall 5 pulled off a good trick, well done to those people who bet well, oh but we've got more Dane apparently coming up, will she drown, is that Mr. Tickles going to eat someone, anyone want to place any bets, place some bets. So yeah, they're going around and they're sort of calling out for the lot of you to fail effectively as performers. You do also notice one other thing. Beneath the bleachers, where there appears to be a gap for some reason, whether it's someone's gone outside to use the facilities, also known as the ground, there aren't really toilets per se, or possibly gone to go and buy some form of treat to sort of tide them over till they can eat a full meal. You can see several pairs of eyes appearing out of the bleachers.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Can
you-
I can I recognize them from the distance as like being humanoid eyes, cat eyes?
the most you can tell is when every time there's sort of the flames from the torch flickers by, they appear to be yellow, the actual eyes, but you can't really tell from the distance you're up quite high and there's a lot going on. You can just about make out for an instant these eyes. 3 pairs of eyes appear to be there.
Okay, so I take my bow from the height where I'm at, and I slide down the pole,
Yep.
and then I move. I take a final bow and I move from the stage.
Excellent. So Reynard Zonk has left.
Oh, as I move behind the curtain, I'll inform Reynard that I saw the gamblers in the crowd.
Excellent. Do you tell him anything about the eyes?
That I'm going to go to Jim with that.
Cool, that's fine. So Reynard, obviously, Zonk has come and told you about these gamblers in the crowd.
Yeah. It is kind of, is it part and parcel? I think it's part and parcel of it that we have, people that stir the crowd up, that have them betting, and I think, shouldn't we expect to get a share of it at the end?
They're not anyone that you recognise as being part of your crew. There doesn't appear to be anything as yet that's causing an issue. Obviously, they are quite where the crowd has simmered down now that Zonk's left, waiting for your next announcement. You can hear them quite a lot more clearly, and they are quite often sort of whooping out, and sort of a lot of the bets they're asking people to make are of a nature that it's, will Mordain drown in her tank? Will Mr. Tickles eat someone? There's not so much of it being an endearing thing. It's sort of how badly can this go?
I understand.
So, I mean, it's one of those that's up to you. There could be the flip side that every time it succeeds, you're probably going to put these guys out of business. Or, it's that extra wow factor that, look at all these things that could have gone wrong and they still survived.
I get you. Okay, so, right then, this is the penultimate act. So we've got Elisa and Mr. Tickles. So I'd line up Elisa and Mr. Tickles, and after that we have the final act of Mordain.
Excellent. So we're going to sort of split the focus here again. So Zonk has come off. Zonk, I'm assuming you're going to go and try and find Jim, who has gone off, and we'll come back to you in a second, Zeke, with that one. At this point, Aisha, you would have finished your investigations into Myron and his demise. As you stand up, you see Eliza and Mr. Tickles beginning to get ready, but Eliza herself, a younger woman, sort of well known as the Snake Chimer, is heading towards you with Mr. Tickle in, this giant viper in her arms, holding his head on her shoulder. And she's concerned. She says to you, "There's something wrong. He won't eat. He won't drink. I can't take him out if he's if he's like this."
Well, it appears he may have already eaten. At least, looks like he has struck our old ringleader.
You would get the impression... Sorry, this was an anaconda, not a viper. The bite is from a considerably smaller creature.
Yes. Okay, yeah. An anaconda, yeah.
Sorry, viper was in my head.
Fine. No, that's fine. That's fine.
So...
I will change what I say so then.
No, that's fine.
Strange. How long has he been like this?
It's not been long. It's only... And she sort of tries to think back. he wasn't even like this yesterday. He was fine yesterday when we were setting up and we were training.
What do you make of this? And I'll point at the viper puncture on the body.
She looks quite aghast. And again, a sorrow fills her face as she sort of again is reminded of the fact that the person that brought her out and sort of gave her a job is now gone. Well, other than a deep sadness, and then she pauses as she notices really what you're trying to get her to look at. Oh, they appear to be a snake bite. They're in fact they're vipers, I believe.
Correct. There's no need to be sad. His physical shackles are gone now, and he can explore the afterlife.
She looks at you sort of as though she finds it endearing that you're trying to comfort her, but the fact the loss is still rather fresh for the idea of the afterlife for him to be much comfort to her. You can, seeing Mr. Tickles, you do see that he does look quite ill. You could do a nature check or a medicine check if you wish to sort of try and discern as a recall
Sure.
knowledge.
Yeah, I think I'll do a nature check because that sounds a bit more like a snake, a thing to do with a snake.
Yeah.
If that's cool with you.
Yeah.
I'll just open my skills. Do I have nature? Yes, I
You do.
So it's +4. So 11 + 4, so that's 15 in total.
Bang on the nail. You
Oh.
recognise this as goblin pox, and you recognise that it isn't lethal as a disease, but it is something that makes it quite unwell and causes all of these sort of symptoms, and that you are aware that he will recover, Mr. Tickles, in a few days from this pox that he's suffering.
It appears Mr. Tickles seems to have some kind of goblin pox, so I would probably... I mean, it's not lethal, but if he's not feeling up to it, you should probably nod to Reynard and inform him before he makes a tit of himself in the ring.
Do you not think he can perform? If it's only going to be a few days, is there anything you can do to try and suppress this problem?
Well, I mean, I can try, but you're the snake charmer.
I can convince him to go on, but whether he'll be at his best, I don't know.
Tell you what, do your best, and then come see me in my tent afterwards, and we'll see if we can apply some salve to this disease he's carrying.
Perfect, cool. So with that, she begins to head towards the tent, and in a minute, John will get you to do the roll for Eliza and the snake charmer, and I'll sort of describe what she manages to do with him. Zonk, however, you've gone off to find Jim. Jim was attempting to sort of track whether you could see any of where the rats had gone, I believed. Zeke?
Yeah.
Yeah. So could you roll a survival check for me, please?
Yeah.
You're at the front. Your survival is +4.
D20.
It is, yeah. But in fact, everything is pretty much D20, bar your weapons and things like that.
Okay, I've got 11.
You see an inordinate amount of rat tracks on the floor, but they seem to go every which way. You're not too sure, but it is clear that there has been a lot of rats around here, and they have been in the storage area where the nets were found. At that moment, you find Zonk come running up to you, though.
Hey Jim, I think there's something under the bleachers. Maybe it's your past problem.
I'll go have a look then.
Okay, so Zonk, are you going to go with him, or are you going to go to direct
Yeah,
him?
I'll go.
Cool.
Yes, I'll go.
So both of you head over, and it is only just round the corner that, in fact, you do head off to. Over round here that you noticed the God, they're so tiny. They're trying to work out which one's which. Far too zoomed out. So underneath, as you sort of start to approach the bleachers, you again using sort of your ability to see much more clearly Zonk in sort of darker conditions. You're able to spot quite quickly the sets of eyes. Can you both do a perception check, or you can do a nature check if you like as well? Which your nature is a +4, Zeke, and it's a D20 roll again.
I'm not trained in nature, so I'm going to stick to a perception.
Perception, yep.
13.
13.
Well, I got a 3, so...
Although you feel you really should know what these are, you are completely unaware, but Zonk, you recognise them to be snakes quite clearly as you approach. Jim, you sort of have an idea. They're snakes, but you wouldn't really know what sort of subspecies of snake. You feel that it eludes you at this point. They do turn to you as you enter the area.
I'm going to keep my distance.
Yep.
I stand a little bit behind Jim. There's snakes, Jim.
So at this point, Zeke, you can do.
I'll slowly approach.
You're going to slowly approach. You have, I believe, you have wild empathy. No, oh no, you're not a druid.
Yeah.
Think of old. You have a couple of options. You can attempt a nature check, or you can attempt a diplomacy check. Your nature check is considerably better than your diplomacy of 0. So, and yeah, you can attempt to try and coerce them out.
I'm going to do a nature.
Go for it. D20 plus. D20 plus 4.
Yeah, I'll do just diplomacy.
Yeah. You've got no bonus to this, so it might be a bit trickier, but
14.
14. The just succeed. You look at the crowd itself that have sort of noticed you guys coming over, seen Zonk, and a few of them have sort of waved down, sort of, oh, it's Zonk, look at Zonk, oh, he was brilliant up there, and sort of leaning down, almost sort of trying to see the stars, as it were, and they sort of get up and start coming around. At that moment, the snakes begin to sort of get a bit more alarmed as they feel a bit encroached on their sort of their own little space. But you manage to sort of calm both, putting your hands out and sort of placating the animals with slow, steady movements that sort of almost slightly mesmerise the snakes, and sort of manage to convince quite calmly the people to sort of part ways, and sort of you then manage to sort of gently direct the snakes who very quickly exit the tent themselves. As they see this sort of rather impressive sort of show, the people begin to clap as well. Sorry, Zonk.
Yeah, I distract the people who have seen us so that they don't see the snakes or panic about the snakes.
That's fine. Could you do a performance check
So
for me?
I'll wave at them.
Yep.
And
Roll a
keep them a bit busy.
Cool. Can you do a performance for me check, so you can just sort of do some
I
sort
can.
of.
Do I have performance?
You do
I
a
have
+6.
21.
Yeah, they sort of. Quite a few of them from being enamoured by your rather excellent performance and curious about, you know, a goblin with a tail, because it's not something that's particularly common to this region. You start cartwheeling around and manage to hop up and down the bleachers and sort of spin around, and sort of again they sort of this small little applause. And then at the same moment, they sort of are slightly distracted by Reynard, who has announced Eliza and Mr. Tickles to the stage, which allows these snakes to disappear off, and you both to sort of escape, as well as having earned yourself some rather nice XP, as though you had defeated those rather vicious vipers in combat. At this moment, Eliza, slightly placated, but with a slightly sickened snake, steps out into the main arena and the snake moves back at this rather large anaconda, sort of about 8 to 9 foot in length itself, starts to sort of snake backwards and forwards around her as they make their way to the ring. As they get to the centre, she begins a song in a language that again seems very strange and unfamiliar, and sings to the snake, which I'm not going to traumatise you with myself. But she begins to sing, and the snake weaves around her. And John, can you roll me a d20 and add 7 to the check, please?
Yeah, 23 I can.
23. Just a couple off a critical success, but very successfully. The snake opens as she is singing, opens its mouth wide, and you can see it dislocate its jaw, and slowly it begins to lower its head over the head of Eliza, as you can sort of hear this slightly odd echoey sound as she continues to sing with the snake. It then raises back off of her, it curls round, and she stands on the back of the snake, and it sort of writhes around, and she stood by the neck, so it lifts her up and carries her around the ring. And again, the crowd sort of watching this rather interesting control of this creature again erupt into applause, and the snake itself, you would expect with this sort of raucous noise to be distracted or confused or become angry. It doesn't even pay the blind bit of notice. The only thing it seems to be focusing on is the sweet song of Eliza. You now have, as the ringmaster, I'll give you the choice, John. She's got the potential to try to do another trick with Mr. Tickles, or she can retire from the ring.
We're happy with that trick. That was about as good as it was going to get.
Playing it safe. Okay. Cool. So she sort of bows, and even the snake, based still in this trance, just actually sort of raises up and then sort of bows down at the middle, and then sort of slithers behind her, and sort of as they get towards the tent flaps, it raises up and rests its head once again on her shoulder, and she sort of gives it a very affectionate stroke. And as they leave, the crowd again sort of erupt, and you can see people looking backwards and forwards at each other, sort of, you know, oh, I wouldn't do that with a snake, God blimey. And you can see the gamblers still wandering around trying to take bets, beginning to look a bit frustrated with the fact that no one's been eaten. This goblin didn't fall off the thing. Any bets they took on Axel were null and void. We then have the dwarven throwers are the next ones. At this point, Rainer, can I get you to make a perception check for me as you're sort of looking out into the crowd, trying to gauge how they're reacting?
Yeah, we've got. So I'm looking for it on my sheet. Because I'm used to the 1E layout, so I went straight to skill for perception. And,
It's under offensive. So you're.
Right, it's so irritating, isn't it? Yeah,
It's
offense at the top. Yeah.
13.
It's a
Got it.
gargle.
13.
13. There's nothing that stands out in the crowd at first, but you then do see managing to push their way right past everyone, and actually, because you haven't quite spotted it, these two very drunk individuals manage to stumble their way forward. They're arm in arm, one male, one female. They're in rather commonplace clothing, and they have stumbled out of the bleachers into the ring area.
Ladies and gentlemen, as an interlude, we have 2 willing participants for a special act from our clowns. And he turns back, he looks at the clowns and gives them that let's cause some trouble stare.
Okay.
He knows what these clowns do to people who get a bit too drunk, and he's expecting these clowns to take them to town.
Okay. So the clowns come out, and this is your one chance to activate the clowns by sending in the clowns. We don't have the sorrowful tune to play in the background, but the clowns come out, and in very classic form, there's, they've got a cart behind them filled with all sort of menagerie of different things, from small fireworks to cream pies to sort of medieval equivalent of silly string, and other sort of little party tricks, and they sort of head over and very my brain has gone blank on the name of the Three Stooges. There we go. Very much like the Three Stooges, they head over, scratch their heads, look at them, and two of them link arms and start staggering around, imitating them. And then one of them sort of, in a very mime-like fashion, they don't seem to use words, sort of tumbles past holding this cream pie, and as tumbling past, manages to critically succeed at throwing a pie into this man's face, and with that, the guy snaps and lunges forward and strikes out at one of the clowns, and cracks poor, as you recognise him, Heckle, who launched the cream pie, in the face. What would you like to do to interact at this point? And then we're going to go into a combat initiative. So Reynard, Jim and Zonk, at this point you can also see a bit of commotion from where you are happening out where there's these two drunken brawlers who things with the clowns have gone a bit wrong.
Okay. Oh, I don't know. What's Reynard going to do?
I'll give you a bit of background in the sort of the circus side of things. At this point in history, it wouldn't, in this sort of setting, it wouldn't be unfounded for you to physically deal with any interlopers. However, obviously, if you are, you run them through with a sword, probably wouldn't come across too well.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so let's Reynard's going to welcome the next act on and try and deal with them whilst the act starts up. So
Mordain, the magician.
If that's okay.
Yeah, no, of course, that's So you sort of you would also notice at the corner of your eye, you can. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, you go. So you
as loudly as you can, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be dealing with this very small this little incident over here. Dealing with this little incident over here. But in the meantime, enjoy the spectacle. And welcome to the magician. Sorry, what did I notice? This was...
while you noticed that, you would have seen from the perception, Jim and Zonk stood off to one side as well.
Okay, so Jim and Zonk, I beckon them to come with me and get them to quickly come to help me deal with this problem.
Cool. All right. And
so, the couple of drunks, are they both fighting, both the man and the woman?
The woman seems to have been spurred on by the man and is now sort of quite happy, and sort of goes over and kicks one of the clowns herself, and sort of finds this amusing, and sort of slightly defending her partner in the fact that he got a cream pie to the face. They're just quite mean drunks. They're not, they've probably been drinking far too much Stella Artois. And they are just sort of, they've not taken it in good spirits. They've sort of turned mean at this point.
Okay, so initiative. I'm going to, because they are focused on the clowns, I think, I'm going to sneak at them. So I'm going to roll stealth for initiative.
Go for it.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
I've got 22.
Nice. Okay. Asher, I really am going to have to sing the song every single time. I mean, if you know, I would say possibly you can join on the second round of combat, but you've sort of been out the back dealing with Myron's body, dealing with Eliza, sort of comforting others as it's going on. So, sort of at this point, Mordain is going out past you and goes, "Well, I suppose someone has to save the show, and of course it would be left to me." And the drunks get and she sort of disappears out into the ring. The drunks get a very appropriate, totally low roll on their initiative, being quite drunk. They're not really ready for a fight. So Reynard, can I have a perception-based one, which yours is +6?
17.
17, nicely done. And again, Zeke, for your benefit, there's with initiative is how we start combat. It's a D20, and normally add your perception. However, if you want to do something similar to Zonk, I don't know what your stealth score is like, but you could try and sneak round with him, or you could be a bit more direct in your movement and just go for a perception-based one, which I believe is a much
I think
higher.
I'll sneak round.
Yeah, I was already on your page. That would be why. Yeah, no, they're equal. Right. So yeah, either way, you're going to end up with a similar score. But roleplay wise, if you want to sneak round, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I'll sneak round.
Okay, D20 +6 for me, please.
I've got an 8.
Okay. You're not quite as deft as the goblin at moving round, and it does take you a little bit longer to sort of try and move round the crowd while there's this whole circus show going on, and aren't quite as nimble. I'm going to do a very basic tokens for these guys. Some lovely squares. So there we go. There's one of the brawlers. And the other 2 different colours for a bit of differentiation. There we go. There are our brawlers there. Okay, so at this point, Reynard, you would have been sort of central to the sort of ring, announcing and sort of jeering, trying to distract the crowd from there. And you guys had moved round to this point when you were trying to dissuade the Vipers from attacking and allowing the crowd to be distracted. So Zonk, we are first up. For the general benefit of people watching and for Zeke, you have your 3 actions. Obviously, you can spend all 3 to move. In total, I mean, I would recommend if you're trying to go around stealthily, avoid going through the middle, as that is sort of where the main audience focuses and might get you noticed by those that are watching out for you, or the drunks.
Well, the thing is, I have this ability of being a goblin, and it's called very sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
And it causes me to be faster while sneaking. And also, I don't become observed after taking a sneak action. I only become observed at the end of my turn.
Yep.
So I think I might be able to cross a part of the middle, like through here, and through to here, and then hide under the bleachers, and I can do it quickly, I think. Oh, but that's a big distance, right?
It is quite a long way.
So a sneak from me, strides while sneaking is 15 feet from me.
Yep, because
So
you
I
get
can,
extra.
Go 45 feet in one turn.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
so no, that's a bit. So I'm going to go underneath the bleachers,
Okay.
and I'll end up here, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you could go down the front of the bleachers, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Yeah, you can get to there.
Okay.
Depending, obviously, you could end up in sort of this square instead, if you like, at the bottom of those bleachers, getting yourself a bit closer.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yep. Okay, after that, Reynard, you can see the drunks in front of you. 2 of the clowns are on the floor, and the third one, the Great Fortunato II, is looking a little bit afraid as the drunks are bearing down towards him.
Right, can I move there to him? Can I get there?
Your base movement speed is 25, I believe. Speed is 25, yeah. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So you can spend 2 movements to get up towards him.
Brilliant. Get me to the nearest drunken brawler.
Yep, so you can get to there quite happily, or you can get to any square around him, basically.
Fine, I'm going to smack him.
Okay, so you're going to use unarmed strike. Are you going for lethal or non-lethal?
Non-lethal.
Non-lethal, perfect. So if you can roll d20 and add your strength and proficiency, so it'll be a total of 8.
Yeah. Oh, 13.
13. Da, 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 da. As they are currently flat-footed, that will hit.
Nice. How do you calculate damage on it?
You are trained in unarmed strikes. I'm just double checking that one. Just so you're aware as well, your whip can be used as a non-lethal weapon.
Can as well, yeah. I won't be using it. Yeah, I obviously can't use it right now, but
No.
well reminded.
Oh, I'm just going to have to look it up. This is where having my second screen would have been really useful. Because I know it off by heart for first edition, because having played a monk, which is much easier. That's helpful. It doesn't actually tell you the damage. Page 2. I'll actually just look up what page it is. 278. I feel done quite well. Only the first time I actually had to look something up so far. Table 6-6. There we go. So it's 1d4 bludgeoning.
Are you okay?
I'm good.
Good, yeah. Something happened with Denton.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Ooh.
there you go. Good.
Yeah, we've lost Luke as well.
What's the non-lethal roll?
So it's 1d4 for your non-lethal.
2.
2 plus your strength, so a total of 5 against the first one. Perfect. And that would be your sort of 3 actions, so that would be your turn there for that one. After that, we then have Jim. Zeke. Hello, Zeke. I love technology. Oh, he's gone.
Yeah, a couple of minutes ago you all
Just disappeared.
disappeared, yeah. But maybe since he was sneaking after me or sneaking with me.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
he's back. You there, Zeke? Oh, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So he can do half movement speed, so he can do 30. So we'll assume you're going to move round Zeke. He's under the impression that everything's crashed.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think Zeke's crashed, so he's gonna
That's
just
fine.
quickly.
Reset. If you can message him to say not to worry, we're just moving him forward, as we assume that's what he would do.
Sure, will do.
Okay, after that, what would you be doing at this point, Asher? I mean, the noise of this isn't probably going to draw your attention particularly.
That's fine.
Yeah.
If I could hear it, I will probably go and take a look if it's quite a
Yeah.
commotion.
Can you roll a
But,
perception for me?
Yeah, sure. I will use my bone dice.
Nice.
I rolled 14, and my perception is +4, so 18 in total.
I will say yes, you can, because there has been probably some commotion from the crowd as sort of obviously this has then started to kick off.
Makes
Can
sense
you
to me.
can you? I mean, so you can hear some kind of commotion outside.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like a performance, and the crowd's sort of kicking
No,
up,
I mean
so
to
that's
your sight, you've only just seen Mordain sort of leave, so it seems a bit strange.
I will pick up my scythe that was by my side whilst I was examining this cadaver,
Yep.
and I will make my way to the ring edge to see what's happening.
Cool. So at that point, you can see some drunken people, Reynard trying to deal with them. If you wish to roll initiative to get in, you can.
I would love to. So with a sigh and a roll of my eyes, I rolled a 17. Where is my initiative on this thing?
Plus
There isn't, is there anymore?
No, it's plus 4 from your perception.
Cool. Okay, so 17 plus
21.
4 is 21.
Okay.
21.
Cool. So after that, we then have the drunken brawlers, and one of them looks straight at you and sort of, "Oh, what you doing, push boy? Bloody trying to hit me?" And he sort of turns to swing a fist at you. And I assume the first strike of a 15 will miss Reynard. So in his drunken stupor, he stumbles forward, tries to strike across you, and you sort of just deftly turn to one side. In sort of a fit of rage, he does actually gain rage and goes to strike you again. And again, the second strike, this is even worse than the first one, and just sort of the rage sort of seems to have taken hold and sort of taken any sense of accuracy with it, and he just completely punches in a space you're not even in. You get the impression he's probably trying to fight the two of you that he can see. His lover sort of, "Oh, what are you doing, Jolene?" and sort of steps round to sort of help out her lover, and you have a reaction at this point, which you can take if you would like, to sort of attack this individual coming in towards you.
Yeah.
Yep, so you'll make an attack action. This will be a -5 because it's your second attack, so it'll be a +3 to your roll.
Yeah. We got 9.
And unfortunately, you sort of go to strike her as she steps in, but miss. She sort of, "Whoa!" and goes to strike you. With a 24, I believe that will hit you.
It will.
It will. Not lethally in any sort of critical success way. And she will deal a staggering 4 points of damage to yourself.
So remind me how, because I've never got this even in one.
Non-lethal.
Damage is calculated.
So
two column.
it's way easier in second edition. Once you get to 0, you're unconscious. That's it. In non-lethal, you're not dying. Obviously, if someone stabs you in the face while you're unconscious, you do gain the dying condition. At this point, however, if you get to 0, you're just unconscious. You're knocked out.
One total. You just track one total, and that's it.
Yeah, I would track them. Sort of just note it as non-lethal. But yeah.
That's fine. Got it. Yep. All good.
Cool. She's then going to try and strike you again. this is agile, so it's only going to be a -4 on the second attack to her total. But with a grand total of a 9, she sort of overstepped, and she almost glances her partner in the face as she goes to strike you again, seemingly trying to attack the imaginary man that you seem to be with, they believe. After that, we are back round to Zonk.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep on sneaking, getting closer every time. Can I go under the bleachers?
If you wish to, yeah. Obviously, it's going to take a bit more movement than going in a straight line. Just in terms of distance, it's going to be a bit further. But yeah, you can go round behind the bleachers. You're going to go for the full 45 again because you are still a way away. Still 100 foot. This place is massive. I'm realising 5.
I think I'm going to sneak to here if I can.
Yeah, you can. You can get to, after that, you could get to there. Oh,
And then I'm going to do a full move. I'm not going to sneak anymore.
Oh,
because
cool.
I'm under the bleachers.
Yep.
So I'll take my full 25 and then 50.
Yep.
I think. So here.
Yep. Can you make us to do the dart across? They're going to do a perception check in a second, but they're going to be distracted. So, you can then do your next move if you like. If you want to move forward.
So how much movement have I taken now?
You've done your second movement, so you've still got
Okay.
1 action left.
So then I'm going to try to sneak to the other bleachers.
Okay, cool. Can you? They'll use their perception DC. So can you roll a sneak for me, please?
Yes.
Stealth. Sorry.
So I have rolled a 12, so that's 19.
19. Strangely enough, in their drunken stupor, and these two Reynards they are fighting, they don't notice you dart. Well, they don't give the impression they notice you dart across. Okay. After that, we have Asher. Really have to sing the song every time. Asher, you can obviously see all this chaos happening on the other side.
I raise my scythe and step forward as far as I can.
Okay. So if you're doing it in full, just full open view, not trying to hide, you have a movement of 30, so you can get 90 foot. At this point, Mordain is beginning to perform in the centre of this ring, and we'll resolve all that because this is all happening simultaneously. But we'll do the combat first, and then resolve what Mordain was doing and how pissed off she is afterwards. So if you were to go straight across, you can get all the way up to them. You won't be able to do anything, but you can. You can use your full movement to go around and get to the other side of one of them.
I tell you what I'll do. I'll move to not the centre where the performer is, but the centre to the left of her where you were just pointing to get halfway. As far as my normal movement will take me, that's brilliant. And then I will cast lights on the blade of my scythe.
Is that a single action, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Cool. So yeah, that would be all of your actions
All
used.
my actions.
Yep.
That's
Cool.
brilliant. Just as like an intimidation, but also I do it in a kind of a flourish to make it look like a performance.
You're just part of the thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you make a deception roll for me, please? Which I imagine you have an amazing deception.
Deception.
Yep. Which for you is a +4, so it's actually not bad. Just to try and do this sort of, I'm coming through and
20.
very nice. If only we'd had that in combat.
It's a +4, 24.
So yeah,
Fine
you
dice, they roll,
you
yeah.
critically succeed at this deception, and I will say that we are going to give a +2 bonus as a result, as it sort of ends up being sort of almost an aid another. I feel as you're sort of coming past, and Mordain is performing this trick, and you manage to sort of twirl around with this scythe spinning in the air
Perfect,
that
yeah,
suddenly
I bring
lights
in a
up.
big circling arc
And it lights up as you go past, and luckily Mordain's back is turned to you, otherwise she'd probably be a bit pissed for you trying to upstage her. But you managed to make it look as though you were actually part of the show itself. After that, we then have Reynard. Obviously, you've been struck once by these drunken fools. The male to your
Yeah,
right.
They're gonna feel it.
Good. One of them to the right of you is sort of classic barbarian style rage, glazed over eyes, sort of gnashing his teeth. He's not really with you on the same plane anymore. The woman drunkenly is a little bit more in control than him.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to. That doesn't matter. So I get out my my whip.
Yep.
And the rage one is the one I hit, isn't it?
The raging one, yes.
Yes. I'm going to try and trip up the raging one.
Excellent.
Do I do that at my normal bonus?
Yeah, I'm just going to double check with a trip modifier on weapons. 278. I have very nicely post-it noted the entire of the book, but I can't remember what I've put as the post-it notes, so it's actually completely bloody useless. Range damage traits. Weapon traits. There
What
we
are
go.
you looking up?
Just checking trip. So you do your athletics skill.
My athletics,
Yeah.
which is okay, very similar. So it's +6.
Versus AC? Yeah.
It's a 9. Yeah, it's a 9. I don't know if it's against AC. What is
No.
it against?
So sorry, what was it you got?
I got only 9. I'm not expecting that to be successful, but
It's
well, they were asking what it's against. Because there's
it will be against their athletics DC, I believe.
Barbarian might not have a good athletics DC, so there might be a chance here.
It's versus the reflex DC.
Reflex DC, that's it. Thank you. Which is 10 plus their reflex, which currently.
So a 9 can't do it.
Unfortunately not. No. It's not far off, but unfortunately not. So you sort of wick out with this first action. You still have one more left because you drew the whip and you've tried to flick it out. You will take a -5 on whatever result that you do here.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't have agile. Yeah, I'm going to try and whip them again. So -5 on this. Oh, that's even worse. No, that is terrible. That is a 3.
Okay. So you not only failed, you have critically failed with this because you are 10 less than the DC. So the deck that is the blue one that you should be able to see, could you draw the first fumble card for me?
I've been itching to draw a card actually.
So yeah. So if you should see if you hover over it, a sort of
You got your
a card sort of slides out and you should be able to pull it.
I said I was going to draw a card. Yeah, I clicked it. I don't see it posted anywhere. Is that
You have to drag it, I think.
Yeah, you have to physically. I'm going to recall it because you've sent it to your hand. I'll drag it out for you.
Up to the top.
So, as it is a melee weapon, you got bad grip. You're going to take a -2 to attack rolls until the end of your next turn with that weapon only.
Okay.
So anything, which is could be worse. So yeah, you sort of try and whip down at him, and as you do, you sort of. It almost looks like it's going to wrap round his leg, but then at the last second, it sort of flicks back and sort of snaps you in the hand, and sort of you're a little bit worried it's going to break under the tension. So you're going to be playing it a little bit more cautiously in your next turn, but it only lasts for a turn, luckily. After that, we then have Jim. Are you there, Zeke?
Yes, I think so.
Hey, you are. Cool. So you've moved round to here, where you should be able to see yourself. You've got 3 actions. You can move. You can give up with the pretense of trying to sneak, because you notice that Zonk has made it quite a bit further than you, and you're noticing that the Asher is drawing quite a lot of attention, and you get the impression sort of you're not going to be too distracting to the performance at this point if you move a bit quicker. And Reynard has sort of got his hands full with these two drunks. So you can either continue to sneak around or move at your full speed.
Menacingly approach with my kukri.
Yeah, so you can use 2 actions to move and draw your weapon. Yeah, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So you can get to there. So you staunched forward, drawing out this kukri. There's a few whispers from people in the bleachers as they notice sort of this rather odd-looking fellow in the coattails that he has, brandishing this rather strange sword and sort of bearing down on these drunks. After that, we have the drunks themselves, who, with no one else to fight, going to take their strikes. The woman still doesn't appear to be sort of raging in the same way. Mostly she doesn't seem to have been hit, so she doesn't seem too pissed off, but she goes to strike at you with a 20 to hit at you, John. Does that hit you, John? Are you there, John? We seem to have lost John.
He left.
Oh, well, that hits him because I know his AC for a total of 5 points of damage. Second strike will miss, and then finally goes for the third strike and will critically fail. As a named character, they are going to draw a card, and oh, that's interesting. They've become stunned 2.
You got hit, Reynard.
You took 5 points of damage, John.
Okay, fine. Yep.
Where's stunned? There it is. So this woman has tried to hit you, and sort of at the last moment on the last one, you managed to sort of deflect the blow, and as you did, you caught her with your elbow as you turned her away and cracked her on the temple, leaving her feeling stunned. Stunned is quite an interesting condition. Stunned 2 is pretty bad. She's struggling to act. She has taken a total of 2 actions that she's now lost. So she has only got 1 action. So she's got 2 rounds that she's going to lose these actions. So next round, she'll only have 1 action. The round after that, she'll have 2. And then finally, on the third round, she'll have 3. So she's struggling there. We then have the other guy who is raging. With the first strike will be a 25 to hit you.
Yeah.
Which, luckily, we haven't hit for a crit. For a total of 4 points of damage.
Yeah, okay.
How are you looking health-wise at the moment? Like, visually, how are you looking?
Yeah, my lips cut. You can see a little bit of blood coming out, dripping down from my ear. And there's a welt underneath my eye, it's beginning to swell. You can see I've taken a kicker. You can see that this can't continue.
No. So, luckily, the second attack goes wide. The final attack, if it had been the first one, would have been a critical success. But as it's a -10, it does still miss as well. Okay, so that's him sort of just angrily staring at you, just sort of raging, trying to hit you, getting rather pissed off that he seems to fail. We're then back to the top. We have Zonk.
So I can see that Reynard has been bruised a little bit, so I don't have really have time to go around.
Yep.
Do I have to go around through here, or can I move through the?
There is enough space. However, you would need to make an acrobatics check to sort of make your way through there. There is enough place for you to sort of squeeze through. It's going to be quite tricky. You feel if it goes wrong, you're going to look slightly stupid. There are also people sat on the bleachers who might be a little bit shocked by a goblin appearing from beneath their feet. But
yeah,
I mean,
I'll go around.
You go around. Yeah.
So, I don't want to get stuck with my with my head between the bleachers. That's a bit.
That would have it would have at least been comic. It might have lightened the mood for the
Yes.
people, but
It would have
but
been
yeah,
entertainment.
yeah,
I'm going to draw my rapier,
yep,
and I'm going to move sneakily over here. But at the end of my movements, they'll probably see me. That's one.
yeah.
Yeah.
As you come out, yeah, they're sort of like, hang on, and they do notice you, and they're like, oh, bloody goblin. And yeah, so that would be all three of your actions to get moved to there, and then sort of have drawn your rapier as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we now have the whirling dervish with the glowing scythe. Asher.
So I stride over behind them. I think I can make that, can't I?
Yeah. With one action used.
Yeah. And then with my last two actions, I click my free hand, and a bright blue fireball. It looks like something like a wisp. A blue fireball produces from my hand, and I yell behind them in an intimidating voice.
Yeah.
Be gone or become ash.
Okay.
Nice line. That is a really good. It's a really good one.
Yep. So, can you roll an intimidate? Is that a spell specifically, or is that you being intimidating?
So that is my produce flame spell, but I'm not actually going to use it to attack them with it. I'm just producing it in my hands as like an intimidation attempt.
Okay.
It's my cantrip from the arcane trait that I got.
So, can you make an intimidation roll for me, please?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. I have no improvements in this. I've got plus 4 apparently.
Oh, there we go.
And I rolled a 16, so that's 20 in
Ooh,
total.
okay. So,
Thanks, Pencil, for hitting that into a 16.
Oh, always good. So you've gone to demoralise them with a sudden shout or a well-timed taunt, or in your case, you've tried to shake them. Which one have you chosen? You've got to choose a specific one. The guy looks just in a apoplectic rage. The woman looks a little bit more with her senses. Who do you wish to target? Luke?
Oh crap! I muted myself. I think the lady, because she
The
would
lady?
be more aware
Cool.
if he's in like a blind rage.
No, that's fine. And what did you get in total?
20 in total.
20 in total. So that is a success.
Nice.
And they are now frightened too. So not only is this poor woman stunned too, she is additionally frightened too. She can basically do sweet FA. So she takes a status penalty to all of her checks and DCs of -2. And again, this will... Oh, good, another thing for me to track. This will, again, reduce 1 per turn. So you've now got this woman drunkenly sort of, going on, sort of turning back and forth, tries to shake her husband, just like, come on, and sort of, but can't really do much in itself. After that, we have Reynard. You notice this woman in front of you is a little bit struggling to stand up, and not just through her sheer drunkenness now. John?
Sorry.
That's right.
Really sorry. So I'm going to go for an unarmed strike with my offhand. Ignore the whip. Trip didn't work. Don't care about that. Going to go for the raging barbarian unarmed strike.
Good. Go for it.
Yeah, 22.
That will hit, and in fact, currently, so close. One off being a critical hit. One off. I'm sorry.
Everyone's going to draw a second card. It's me.
So roll for damage. 1d4 plus 3. It's one off. I'm sorry. I thought his AC had been lowered again, but you're not the one that's flanking.
I'm going to draw another card. I'm telling you this. 4 damage because it's
4. Yep.
4.
Yeah, he's beginning to look a little bit injured by this. Okay. You still got 2 more actions.
Then second one, yeah.
Yeah.
You strike again.
Go for it.
So this is 5 less than my base attack bonus.
Yeah.
15.
15 will hit.
Nice. So another D4. Another 1.
Jesus. So a total of 4. Going to go for the last attack.
Yeah, one more. Yeah, last attack. 20 on the dice. So that was actually an 18 because that's. 18
Was it a natural 20?
Natural 20, a card drawing 20.
So because it's a natural 20, this is where the success system slightly differs. A natural 20 will increase the success by 1. So as a total, you have got a success, and as the natural 20, you've increased it by 1. So it is a critical success. So you can draw a green card. Do you want me to do it for you? As last time you. Yeah.
Yeah, for a moment I didn't. You were, yeah, brilliant.
So
what we got?
it's bludgeoning.
When I read, you got bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, bomb or spell. Yeah, bludgeoning. Crit effect: the target is knocked prone and
done 2. So they can do nothing at this point. Near enough. They've only got 1 action each. So yeah. So he is now prone. And that is your turn, which is done pretty well there. So you then, it's normal damage, unfortunately. So it's 1d4 plus 3 again.
Sorry?
1d4 plus 3. It's normal damage, that one was. Is that better, Luke, that you were going for with the screen?
I am just waiting for it to
update. Yeah, I realised that as soon as I said.
Damage.
Yeah, what was the damage?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Better.
Cool.
That's loads better.
7 damage.
Now you haven't got your bar along the top,
Cool.
so it means that you can.
Yeah, and with that, you do knock that one out cold. He goes down.
Fantastic.
After that, we then have Jim again. You notice this one Zeke has just gone down, and he's now seems to be unconscious. So Zeke, do you want to move in to try and attack the other? Okay, so 10, 15, 20, 25. So you'd need to use 2 of your 3 actions to get into a combat range with the woman. You, as a ranger, I don't know if you happen to know offhand, Claudio, if they have access as unarmed strike as a
unarmed strike
weapon.
for rangers.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as you are trained in simple weapons,
They've got simple
you are
weapons.
also
Cool.
trained in unarmed.
So, this for you will be a normal attack. Unless you want to sort of stab them with the sword, it's sort of up to you. Your cookery you've got. You get the impression that you've noticed Reynard only hitting. He hasn't stabbed them or anything like that. And you would also be aware, having been part of the circus for a while, it's sort of frowned upon murdering guests, even if they are problematic.
What's the more peaceful option?
Hitting them with your fist rather than stabbing them.
Yeah, I think I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay, so it will be D20 plus 6.
Okay. I got a 4.
On the dice. So for a total of 10.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that strike as you go forward, sort of initially expecting to slash out with your sword, you unfortunately do just miss her. At this point, we then have Zonk. Obviously, you've got the unconscious body in front of you, lying down. What would you like to do?
Oh, it's my turn again.
It is, yeah. Oh yeah,
Um,
she's got one action. Sorry, she's going to take a sort of a swing at the one that tried to scare her, and strangely enough, critically fail. Um, natural one on the natural one on the. Oh, we've hidden the deck. No more critical successes apparently. So she is slowed one. So genuinely, she can do nothing at the moment. After that, it is then Zonk.
yeah, so at this time, one of them is KO or stunned.
The yellow one, the bloke, is currently unconscious.
Okay.
The woman is frightened, slowed, and stunned. She's doing really well.
I think I'm going to. It just feels so violent. But okay, I'm going to try to KO her. So I'm going to try to knock her out with a well-placed backhand with my rapier. So it's a hilt.
Yep.
That takes a -2, I think, because
As an improvised weapon, you get a -2.
yeah. So I'm going to check. Is she flat-footed?
She is, yeah. she's screwed currently.
Okay, so that's 12 to hit.
As she is flat-footed, that will succeed.
Then I'll sneak attack,
Yep.
and that's nice. 12.
12 points of damage. Nicely done. Okay.
She is not KO or.
No. She's not actually taken any damage yet.
Okay, so I'll do it again.
Yep.
So I have taken one action to move up to her,
Yep.
and then I'm going to try to finish it with a minus.
-6, as it's -2 on the improvised, and then agile, so -6.
Rapier is not agile, so
Oh,
it's minus.
it's finesse, isn't it? Sorry.
Yes.
So this is a +0 to the roll.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I roll a critical fumble.
Oh dear. We're doing really well at getting all of the critical fails and not much of the success. So your weapon is lodged into a nearby surface. You must succeed at a D20 athletics check made as an interact action.
Sorry, Raiders.
So as you go to sort of slap down at her, it catches initially on her cloak and you stumble, twisting the rapier around, and you lodge it straight into the ground.
Okay.
You still have one action, so you can attempt the DC 20 athletics to try and pull it out.
No, that'll be for my next round because I had to do a stab, a 5-foot stab.
Oh, you did, yes, sorry, yeah.
Uh,
That is correct. Well done for being honest. After that, we then have Asher, even.
Does the honesty land me a hero point?
It will do. You can have a hero point for honesty. I will always
Right.
reward that. Luke,
So
you are muted
I
again.
will. Am I muted now?
No, you're not.
Oh, good. Bloody technology.
I think we should ban
Right.
mute.
Okay, what have we got that we can do to show off with? So what's the status of these two? Because there's been quite a lot that's happened to them now, isn't
One is really unconscious. Sort of, you can see sort of he was enraged, but all of that seems to have dissipated now that he's not with the world. No,
there? Just the woman left, really.
it's just the woman who is currently stunned. No, wait, yeah, stunned 1, frightened 2, and slowed 1.
Condition screwed. Nice.
Yeah, nothing for me to keep track of or anything. Yeah, so I mean, what would you like? You have noticed that the rest of your comrades have attempted to not kill the people, but merely knock them unconscious.
Okay.
You can
I will
decapitate the
turn-
woman, but
I will turn to our newly appointed ring master.
yeah.
Do you want them alive?
Yeah, wrong accent. Different path. Different path. Oh yes, of course. Yes, we wouldn't want any more casualties. The cleaning up, such a mess. Take them outside though. Take them out the back. Lock them up with a strong man.
I will cast harm on the woman
Okay,
with a casual flick of my hand.
that will count as a lethal attack.
Yes.
Okie dokie. All of this effort to keep it non-lethal.
So what's that? So, you channel negative energy to harm the living or heal the undead.
Yeah.
The target is a living creature. You deal 1d8 negative damage to it, and they get a basic fortitude save. Okay, so
What's your spell DC?
My spell DC is 17.
17. With a total of 20, unfortunately. Oh no, she takes a -2. So, yeah, unfortunately, it's still an 18, so it's still a pass. But unfortunately, she sort of manages to shrug off the impact of your harm spell.
Cool. So I glance at Reynard, but I remain indifferent as if I haven't done anything.
Fair enough. You've still got one action remaining.
I will raise my scythe to the lady's throat and just say the words "move."
Okay, can we have a coercion as your intimidate check? So,
Sure.
roll to intimidate.
I got another 16 on my intimidate. So +4 is 20 in total.
Nice.
I've rolled exceptionally well tonight. I might start using the chat because this isn't like me, and I'm feeling weird about it.
It's all going to suddenly go wrong.
Yeah.
Helps when you're looking in the right section. Looking through feats for something that is clearly not a feat. So, coerce. With threats either veiled or overt, you attempt to bully a creature into doing what you want. You need to spend a minute. So you can do a demoralise. You can't do the threat unless you wish to spend the 10 rounds of combat.
Yeah, I'll do that as part. I'll just sort of just have my scythe against her, and she can decide whether or not she wants to move during combat.
Yeah. Cool. That's fine. So we'll do it as a demoralise then.
Yeah, sure.
So you're going to try and re-frighten her to another level of frightened, which she critically fails. I've rolled four natural ones. This is ridiculous.
Keep playing like this, guys.
So
this path is going to be over soon.
she's already frightened 1, so she becomes frightened 3. It adds frightened, but I think it literally just restacks her to frightened 2. So she is doing really badly. After that, we're then back to Reynard. You see in front of you this person that is in a drunken stupor, seems to have slowed down in her movements, seems to be a bit sort of shocked by everything going on, but also it is terrified of Asher behind her.
Yeah. So,
Thank you, Zonk. I realised that as I said it, it wouldn't go up because that would be really stupid.
So he's going to put his hand on Asher. No. This is not what we're about. This will never do. And tries to push the side away and drag this person by their feet out of the room.
So
no. This will never do.
Okay, so we're going to try and do a grapple, I assume.
Let's just see. Let's just play it out. Let's just see what Asher will do.
Yeah. So how would you react to that, Asher?
You can see the temples on my head I'm trying to form some words that I don't like dealing with these idiots, so I lower my scythe and I'll look to walk away, but obviously that as it plays out, I'll sort of just lower my scythe for now.
Yeah.
So I'll start trying to drag this lady out of there.
Okay. Can we
Jim,
go?
come on. Jim, come on. You two, come on. This will be fast with you.
Okay, so can you do a grapple check for me, which is an athletics check? So D20 plus your athletics. 19. You match. Oh no, you exceed her because she's currently got a -2 to bloody everything. Yep, you managed to grab hold of her. So yeah, you've got hold of her, and sort of at this point you can sort of role play it out that things are not going well for her, and with the four of you around, you quite quickly subdue this woman, and I believe that at this point, Reynard, you'll sort of let the others, if they wish, to sort of take them away, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. While all this sort of chaos was happening in your little bubble, there was Mordain in the background attempting to perform her trick, even with the glowing scythe that sort of was slightly distracting. As you haven't rolled anything, Zeke, can you make a D20 roll for me for the trick, and we'll see how successfully this goes.
11.
11 on the dice, so that gives you a total of 18 with her trickery skill. Mordain has come out, and again, she is really happy currently right now, as she now gets the impression she is the main act for the evening. She believed all along that clearly she should be. She is far better than the paupers that make up the rest of this circus troupe, and comes out into the middle, and there is very much a flamboyance to her act. It is there's lots of showmanship. What are those two magicians, Teller and Penn? Very much in that sort of same vein of Penn, not so much Teller. You do notice her equivalent of Teller, Hod, her assistant, that sort of manoeuvres around. Again, is another human, but sort of very plainly dressed, as though he shouldn't be noticed. Sort of goes round, and she stands up on top of this rather large tank of water that has been brought out by a few of the sort of stagehands, and gives a speech of, now, using my vast and superior magics, I will dazzle you with a display of escapism. None of you will quite understand how, but you will see me manage to release myself from this watery prison that could become my grave. And at that moment, Hod sort of steps up and starts manacling her up, and she then descended upside down, very classic Houdini style, into the water. A curtain drops down around her. A puff of smoke suddenly explodes from the top, and as it dissipates, she is stood at the top in a completely different and far more fetching outfit of purples and blues, almost peacocking in style, stood above this as the screen drops down, and there is nothing but the water left in the tank. And she begins to bow, thank you, and she looks down to Reynard, sort of cocking her head as though, should she continue?
Yeah, that is brilliant. She's doing so well. More.
Okay, so she sort of nods, and Jim, Zeke, can we have another roll for me, please?
Yeah. 13.
13. So again, she performs her sort of second part of the trick. This time, even more locks and everything else come out of the woodwork, and she's chained not only within the water, but chained physically by Hod, who gets in the tank, to the bottom of the tank. 3 times the amount of chains as before adorn her, and the screen goes up once again, and this time there's a pause. There's silence, as unlike before where it seemed almost instantaneous where she escaped from the water. There's no one coming out at this moment, and even Hod himself sort of looks around a little bit confused. And then a huge plume of smoke erupts from the next ring across from her, and just suddenly stood there, still in the same outfit, disappointingly, but stood raising her hands up in a sort of finishing athletic gymnast pose. She takes a bow, and the crowd erupts in a roar. Literally just succeeded on that, though, because much like the attack action, you take a -5 on the second one, and you take a -10 on the third one. So there is that risk reward. The more tricks you do, the more excitement it generates. But if you fail, there's the potential that she could drown, or and there's that higher risk, which obviously up until this point no one has taken that risk. You can see her breathing quite heavily at this point, though. She looks to Reynard quizzically, as though sort of, surely this is the end.
Yeah, this is the end. And Reynard starts running around the ring, making clapping.
Yeah. At this point, the whole audience has erupted in stunned applause, sort of cheering, weeping. You hear calls of different names of sort of people calling out to Mordain and to Zonk and the Featherfall Five and sort of all the other ones that were there. Can
Reynard see Jim? Is Jim within sight at the moment?
Yeah, I mean he's the three of them have disappeared off, but I mean in this time they'll be able to make it back.
Yeah, so as he's running around, Reynard spots Jim. Jim, my boy, up in the stands there. You see those? They're making money. The bettors, the gamblers, up there. Shake them down for me. Go and find them. Shake them down. They owe us a cut. Go on. I know you've got this. He continues running round.
Okay, just sort of calling out, sort of, it's sort of the end of the show at this point. So sort of giving the final sort of send off. And Jim, you notice the men that Reynard was pointing out to you. Do you head towards? See, yeah. So you start climbing up the bleachers.
Yeah, go towards them.
Yeah. Okay, so they notice you approaching, and they're still calling out. No, better come back for the next show. I'm sure we'll get some brilliant different bets there. That someone's got to drown sometime, someone's got to fall down at some point. We'll see what happens next time, and they sort of see you.
Still have my cookery out.
Unless you put it away, yeah. So they sort of see you coming, and they sort of start to try and make a hasty sort of escape almost down the other side of the bleachers to you.
Can I try to sneak or position myself at the other end of the bleacher, like to hold their...
Yeah, you can go and stand at the bottom. So as they sort of come down, they sort of see Zonk, and they keep looking back. Jim, I assume you're following them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they sort of see you coming closer, and they get down towards you. They are three quite burly looking ruffians. They don't particularly look well-meaning in any sense of the word. And they sort of get closer, and one of them under hushed breath, as some of the patrons are beginning to leave as they've sort of realised the show is coming to a conclusion. Out of the way, Goblin.
Oh, made any money today, fellas?
I think if we count up, we might have just broken even, given all this hullabaloo. We were hoping for a bit more dramatics, I suppose.
Haven't you guys heard about the tax for gambling on our terrain? Have you paid it? I think not, right?
Circus tax. Yes. So
I love it.
Can you make a? Are you trained in deception? I assume you are.
Yeah.
Can you make a lie for me, please?
I can definitely try deception. I've got a 22.
22, and yeah, I mean, they look down at you. They look back at each other, sort of, and you sort of hear them mumbling. A tax? Have we had to pay that before? Well, they haven't been here before. They're new, aren't they? I suppose if we pay it, maybe they'll let us back, and then we can get lucky. And they're just having this little sort of conflab in their sort of little huddle, and they turn back to Zonk. Yeah, we've heard of this circus tax. Yeah, it's like 10% of our earnings, isn't it?
No, it's a. I think it's a few measures just for the right to hold bets and organize bets here. Isn't it, Jim? What was it again?
Yep. I think there's 3 measures actually.
3 measures. Make it 4. Because it was such a special night.
Love it.
Can I have one of you make a diplomacy check?
Uh,
Jim,
Uh, I'll
Yeah.
do an 8 on the diplomacy check.
Cool.
So I have to reach a 20, I think?
Yeah, you do.
I don't.
What did you get, Zeke?
I got a 6.
Oh,
A 6. They sort of scoff at the idea of it being as high as 4 measures, given the fact that, just for anyone watching, that is gold. We're using the Absalom regional currency. In terms of how much, just so you're aware, Zeke, the average person sort of makes a gold every couple of weeks. It's not sort of throwing around money. They scoff. They say, "Oh, it's not that high. Don't be ridiculous." And they offer 2 measures, 2 gold pieces, down towards, up towards you, Jim.
Nice.
Do you accept their offer?
Okay.
Yeah, and they sort of said, "Right, well, I guess we'll see you for the next show then."
yeah, do come again. Don't forget to pay the tax.
Yeah, I love the fact we now have these 3 random gamblers that are going to become some weird side questy thing. So that's amazing. So I'm going to make a note of that. We're going to flesh these random ruffians out into proper characters. So yeah, they sort of slightly sort of barge their way past Zonk, sort of grumbling a little bit, and the roughest sounding one at the back was like, "Oh, we should have just hit him. It's a bloody goblin, bloody tiny." As they sort of make their way out, and sort of that other one, he didn't look too tough either. He's wearing a blooming coat, and yeah, they sort of make their way out and leave the venue. So eventually, after a couple of minutes, the circus quietens down. The sconces, a few of them have been taken out. The ones around the ring, there's a few that are sort of the guiding lights that are sort of like your exit signs for people that are left alight. However, the more pressing matter now begins to take mind for you, as you're very much reminded of the fact that Myron is still lying out the back dead. In such as the professor comes straight towards you, Reynard, in your sort of circling. Do you think now it's over we should go and deal with the other matter?
Oh, certainly. Oh, certainly. Now the crowds have entered, I can't think of anything more pressing. Come on, let's. For the sake of all of us, it's been weighing on our mind. I'm surprised. Except for the fact that we are professionals. Professionals. I am surprised we all managed to cope with the weight of this.
Okay. So I assume you all will head out to regroup that way, as obviously Asher will have some knowledge to relay to everyone.
Well, now you've finally finished with your theatrics, we can talk about the cadaver that's lying in front of us. Obviously, the man is dead. If you draw your attention to his ankle, you'll notice puncture wounds from a snake. Poison, no doubt. The bite of a viper. Very strange for a viper to bite someone unprovoked, so I'm assuming foul play.
Well, we've seen vipers, right, Jim? We've seen 3 of them under the bleachers.
You,
Didn't even pay tickets to see us perform. Those vipers.
Interesting. Anyone suspicious near them?
Us.
I roll my eyes at this. Yes, quite.
Okay. At that moment, the professor sort of steps forward again, accompanied by a few of the other ones, including the clown troupe, Heckle sort of holding his face, sort of from the rather vicious bludgeoning he received from the two individuals that were sort of drunkenly attacking and almost ruining the circus. And he sort of says, "Well, now it seems possibly unlike her, but I wouldn't put it past her completely. But it hasn't been long since we left Mistress Dusklight, the leader of our old circus troupe, and she is known for being vicious, and I can't imagine she would be too happy to learn that Myron had set up his own competing circus."
His own competing circus. What more do you know of this?
Well, since we left the mistress because we were not really enjoying the way she treated us, we've not really heard from her. But given what we know of her, we can't imagine she would take too kindly to competition. And but I mean, this is merely hearsay at the moment. I mean, it's she was cruel, but whether murder would be in her wheelhouse, I don't know.
And her name again. And this mistress, her name.
Mistress Dusklight.
Dusk.
I mean, being a cat folk and all, she's rather sneaky at the best of times.
She's not a cat folk, she's a snake.
Oi. But I mean, has anyone else seen anything around that would be considered suspicious?
Not that I'm aware of. But the matter in hand, this body.
Oh, the nets.
Shall we build? Oh, sorry. You were saying.
Remember the nets were cut and damaged.
Cut and damaged, you say? How
Let's.
so?
It looked like gnawing or bite marks.
That's it. He sort of turns to look at Jim. That seems strange, and we still sent the troop out. They still did their act without any support underneath them. Oh, we're very lucky they were quite so successful, I guess. And he sort of sends Heckle off to go and have a look at the storage container. Heckle, go look. And he sort of turns to you and explains. It's quite. I'm going to avoid doing his voice too much because I'm going to ruin my throat. He explains to you that it's odd that they would have managed to get to them, or they would have even gone for them, because the nets are held on a sort of a platform above the ground, in its own storage container. They'd more likely go for the food than they would a set of nets just for no apparent reason. Did you anyone else find anything else suspicious? Did you see where these creatures went, Jim?
There were tracks all over the place. Couldn't make anything out.
Seems strange for there to be so many. It's not like we've been here long, and you sort of looking around, you notice that the circus is incredibly tidy. There's no sort of sense of squalor. All of the animals sort of stored in this area are all in very well kept cages. There's no food lying around. There's nothing that would indicate as to why there would be rats, particularly in the vast quantity that Jim has noticed in terms of footprints.
So about the body. Shall we build a funeral pyre?
I believe that will suffice. Maybe if we put him to rest in one of the wagons for tonight, possibly even his own would be a good place. probably to leave him, and then we can do that tomorrow. I think having spoken to some of the performers, the realization after the event of their first major show, they're all a bit stunned now, and the idea of, given his position and Myron dying right in front of them, right in the area, it's left them a bit scared. I don't know whether maybe you should help appease them by looking around the camp and everything else.
Right. Let's get to it then. Let's get to it. Let's go looking. Everybody, come on. And he just, ushers people. Hush. Let's take a look. So, describe to us what is outside of the circus tent.
I will do one better. We'll show you. Again, it is quite a large map. I will also remember to bring you with me, because that's also more useful. So,
you've got has anyone ever told you, James, you've got the biggest map?
Once or twice.
Oh, look at the size of his map.
Oh, it's a big map.
It's a generous map.
It's got a lot of girth to it.
It suffers a bit in length. There we go. I've had to resize you because this map isn't quite as impressively sized as my previous maps.
You've clearly polished this map.
It's a very shiny map. It's well looked after. So as you sort of come out, you recognise your campsite where there are multiple wagons around, and sort of it's quite a large sprawling encampment out the back of the tent. So obviously the northern side is where you would find the sort of main entrance for the punters and everyone else. This bit is almost sort of cordoned off. There's sort of a vague fence line sort of stopping any sort of curious punters from entering the area. You're sort of presented with the main campsite. The main thing now that a later sort of evening's drawing in, we're sort of looking at about 7 o'clock in the evening. You can see the campfire beginning to burn. The sun hasn't completely set. It is sort of the equivalent of June in Serenith. We are on today's date, on Oath Day, the 18th of Serenith. So it's there's still daylight, but it is beginning to fade somewhat. But the campfire is the main thing that sort of draws your attention, where there appears to be a multitude of the sort of the performers and other individuals sort of sat, all looking inwards towards the fire. If there's any sort of check or anything you want to make now you're outside, again, obviously, Jim, Zeke, you're aware of a multitude of footprints. Whether anyone wants to do anything with that sort of information, they can do. At this point, for Zeke, you can either sort of do a survival check or a perception check to try and look for any more evidence of footprints and any clarity you might be able to find from that.
I'll do a survival check.
Okie dokie. So D20 plus 4.
Yes, 15.
You do see multiple tracks heading out, but again, they sort of fade out quite quickly. You can't quite discern where they're going, but you do see them sprawling around the campsite. You can't really pinpoint exactly where they head. But there are quite a few.
Can I do a quick look around? Basically, I think the seek action.
Yep.
Look for things that are out of the order around the camp. That
Go for it.
might take me a while, but
Yeah, go for it.
I'll roll up a perception check.
Yep.
I rolled a 13, so I think that's 20. 19.
19. You sort of notice Jim, who sort of mentioned these rat tracks. Now he's outside trying to scour to see if he can notice a few more. His human eyes sort of leaving a bit to be desired in this sort of dimming light, and you can see him looking around and sort of notice him pointing out a few things that he spots. With your slightly keener goblin senses, you sort of begin to see the tracks that he's sort of pointing at, but you get a better you're able to discern a lot more the directions that they head, and given the fact that obviously you're part of the troop, you would know sort of these locations, and I'll point them out to you on the map. You notice that a set of them head straight to the ringmaster's cabin itself, the most ornate looking one, which is sort of just off to the east of the campfire. You then have Bardolph the Bear's wagon, which is heading off slightly to the west, which again slightly off to the left of the map. You also have another set that seems to be heading towards the woods, which is down slightly to the south in this direction. And finally, you have one heading to the Canbali wagon, which is much further south there.
Okay. And they are heading towards those locations.
They are indeed.
I'll inform the group.
Okay. So there are 4 locations. I'm just going to put a little blue dot on them, or whatever colour I happen to choose first, just so you remember the sort of where of was given, because it's easy to forget things. Obviously, I'll remind you of what the location was. I mean, the woods is a fairly obvious one. It's the only one with trees. The other wagons, obviously, you've got Bardolph the Bear. You have the Ringmasters, the Kambali family, the ones that were the quite fantastically falling troop. At some point soon as well, I'm sure the professor, once he's worked everything out, will inform you of how successful the show it was. You get an impression from the audience themselves that it was a pretty good show, based on their reactions. And then finally the woods, as well, was the last location that Zonk has managed to discern as being somewhere that these rather concerning number of rat tracks seem to head.
So does Zonk tell us which of there are 4, and then it's over us to, I guess, knock on the caravans? Is that what we're thinking?
I mean, yeah.
Is there any of the Kambali family? They were at a performance, and the other one,
So you had Myron's, which is this one here. Obviously, he was at the performance, but not as a participant. The Kambali were the only ones that were actually there performing. A bit of history is being as part of the troupe, you'd be aware. Bardolph the Bear, the original Great Fortunato, hence why you now have the Great Fortunato II, mysteriously died as the original group attempted to leave the Celestial Menagerie. As they tried to leave, he was found stabbed in an alleyway in the rather large city of Escador. There we go. Remember the name. He was found murdered in the street from a knife wound. It looked like a robbery gone wrong. So Bardolph has been in his trailer for a little while and hasn't been used as part of the show as a result. Currently, the Great Fortunato II is attempting to train him up.
Yeah, so maybe we can look there first, because if he's there and all the rats went there, maybe there's something going on. Maybe he's in trouble.
Okay. We're going to head to...
Bring it.
Yep, going to head to the wagon. Cool. So, as you do, again, there are obviously quite clearly a large number of tracks in front of you that you can obviously notice. Do the rest of the group head with him? Are we staying together? You don't have to physically move yourself. I'm just checking.
Yeah, Jim's going to come with. Go on then, Jim.
Okay. So, he again, Bardolph has been kept around partly because he could be retrained to work with someone else, but mostly because he held quite a soft space in Myron's heart, who couldn't bear leaving the poor bear behind with Mistress Dustlight, even after Great Fortunato was tragically killed. So he stole Bardolph the bear's trailer and took it with him. He's able to perform slightly still, but nothing up to the sort of the same level as he was before. Currently, the wagon has no lock, holding it shut, but there are closed doors.
So Bardolph is just a bear.
Bardolph is just just a bear, yeah.
Okay.
A large grizzly bear.
It's the second, right? So the Great Fortunato is Bardolph, or
No. Bardolph the bear is Bardolph the bear. The Great Fortunato was basically his handler.
His handler, and,
Yeah.
and the Great Fortunato the second is his current handler.
Is currently attempting to become his handler, but hasn't really got very far, as Bardolph has suffered a foot injury on the journey here when trying to be trained, so he's been left to rest. So yeah, currently the door is closed. There is a very heavily chewed rope, but you would be fully aware that Bardolph the bear, being fairly well trained, actually opens and closes the door himself, and you can see part of the rope going through the closure.
After you, Jim. I mean, it's a bear. Goblins and bears don't match.
Don't make good friends.
They are one of our many natural enemies.
Really? Oh.
So yeah. So do you head forward, Zeke, and open the door?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you push open the door, and obviously this bear is going to fill far more of the space than is actually available to the wagon. Good old Pathfinder designing things that are much smaller than the actual space. So inside this wagon is a large grizzly bear, who apparently is the same size as much larger than the wagon, as you should now be able to see on the screen. As the door opens, it looks up at you, and there is something slightly clouding its vision. Can everyone position themselves where they would have been at this point? I think I don't know if I've done Zeke. Yeah, Zeke can move himself. I think the only one that can't is Reynard, who now should be able to. Oh no, not if I click the wrong name. There we go. You should now be able to move yourself, hopefully.
I'm not sure if I can. I've got. I need to change the settings to get.
Oh,
this
okay.
Yeah, I'm going to move myself behind Jim.
Yeah, where did you want to end up, Reynard? And I can place you there if you just give me an idea.
Can I say that I have my weapons drawn in preparation for fighting some rats or being attacked maybe
Yeah.
by rats?
Yeah, no, that's fine. You'd be under the impression that, you're not sure what you're going into, so that's fine. Is there anyone else that would have had their weapons drawn as the same idea, or is everyone else just...
My scythe is too cumbersome to put away, so I guess it's already in my hand.
just permanently walk around, and
it's my walking aid.
It's
so
your walking
that's
aid.
how I see it, yeah. So
Okay.
I imagine it's just there, yeah.
as the door opens, and Jim, you are confronted with this towering grizzly bear. You notice that its eyes see you, and instantly looking out at you, it roars. Can we roll for initiative, please?
What?
There's something amiss about the bear, you would notice. This is a perception-based one, please.
For all of us, yeah.
Yes, please.
I've got a 10 this time.
10.
I got an 8.
Jim, staying consistent. You don't want to know what...
17.
17.
Really good.
You really don't want to know what the bear got.
Oh,
Reynard?
That's actually an 18 in the chat that I just posted.
Cool.
It's
18.
I'm never using the roll bar. It rolled me a 5. I'll stick with my rolled 17, thanks.
Yeah, so yours is a 5, is it? Or you're not added your perception bonus?
No. Oh yeah, perception bonus as well on top.
Yeah.
So that would be +4. So
9.
21.
So 9 with the 5.
No. I'm not using that.
Oh, okay.
Wait,
I'm using the one I rolled. I just thought I'd test it.
is mine...
So did you roll an 8 on the dice, Zeke?
Yeah.
Okay, so you add
Yeah,
your
I've got an 8 on the dice.
perception, so your perception is +6, so it's a 14 in total. So Zonk did correct to hide behind you as you're going to act first. However, this bear, in pure rage, comes stomping out of the wagon, taking a 5-foot step down towards you. Raiden is 24. Sorry, there we go. So after he's taken a step down, it is going to take a bite down at you. Again, you know this bear, and this seems very strange, as it's never attacked anyone before. And I can't see my dice. So, rolled an 8 on the dice for a total of a 19 against your AC, Jim, which is a 17. So he will hit you, and this is going to really hurt, so I'm sorry. At least it wasn't critical. So this is 2d8 plus 4. Obviously, John and Luke have fought one of these before in a previous thing, and know that these things are bloody lethal. So that is a total of 16 points of damage.
That's not good.
So you are now on 3 hit points.
bloody hell.
It is then going to take a swipe down with a claw towards Zonk as it notices the goblin. So you know how I rolled lots of natural ones?
Yeah, yeah.
So this wasn't a natural one. This was the other end of the scale. So this is a 30. No, to -4. This is a 27.
Yeah.
So this is a critical hit. So this is going to be a horrifying 4d8 plus 8.
At this stage, that is insane.
Yeah.
Zong out.
Oh my god.
We're going to hope for some ones here. Not so much. So that is a total of 30 points of damage.
Oh, come on.
You saw what happened last time to Rob when you fought a grizzly bear.
Destroyed.
This exact same thing happened. I shouldn't be allowed to control grizzly bears. So Zonk, I'm very sorry. You are currently on dying 2 as this claw comes round and just crushes you to the ground, knocking you clean off your feet. After that, so will move. Oh, you're already just before the bear, so you won't move as a result. After that, we have Reynard. You've just seen this bear just take a chunk out of poor Jim and just flatten Zonk to the ground.
Okay, so
Nicely done.
So good. We didn't have the last encounter in this. There would have been no healing in between, would there?
No.
So I want to do something with medicine to increase my hit points. What do I do?
So you have treat wounds that takes 10 minutes.
Don't have that.
You don't have 10 minutes, no. So because you have to be a. There is something you can do, but I don't think you'll have the skill level to achieve it, because you can do treat wounds as an action, but as you haven't got to that point yet, I don't think you'll have that. I'm just going to double check because
Yeah, that's with medicine. Yeah, that takes 10 minutes. You have to be trained in medicine.
Yeah. You need a set of healer's tools as well.
Yeah. Okay, then instead, I'll go up to Zonk and try and treat his wounds. So I'll move there and try and
so effectively, you're going to try and stabilise him.
Yeah, I've got so I add my medicine to this, do I?
Yeah. So yeah, you can do a recovery check on him. So
Recovery with medicine.
yeah, I've just got to double check because it's his fortitude. Recovery. Google is going to be quicker. I don't want the spell.
The difficulty is 5 plus my recovery roll DC.
Which is 12, so it's 17.
17. Okay, let's see what we get. Oh, I got 20. I rolled a natural 16 for a 20.
Yeah, so you managed to stabilise him. So he is still at dying 2, but he's not bleeding. Well, sorry, he's back to 0. He has wounded 2, but is currently unconscious as opposed to dying.
Oh right, just unconscious.
Yeah.
Okay. Here, my boy. Here you are. And then.
Is that you, mother?
Can I draw weapons? Can I draw
Yeah.
more than one? Or just one weapon at this time?
You can draw 1 weapon per action.
Then I'll draw my longsword.
Cool. After that, we have Asher, who's muted.
That's okay. Yeah, I figured. So I brace myself, scythe in hand, and my blue eyes glaze over with like this frosty white, and you hear this voice emanate from me that sounds kind of otherworldly, and I say, "Be healed," and I will cast a 3-turn healing spell.
Nice. Which effectively is like channel energy, so everyone gets it, don't they?
Everyone gets it because I figured the bear hasn't been
Yep.
hit yet. So everyone will receive 1d8 plus 8 heal. I think it's 1d8 plus 8.
It is, yeah.
It is. Yep. So 1d8 plus 8. I rolled a 7, so that's 7 plus 8.
15.
Is 15.
Nice.
So 15 HP.
I think the area heal doesn't count the plus 8.
Is it just the D8?
Is it just the d8? Because it says...
I think so.
where is it? You disperse positive energy to targets all of... Spell... increase the hit points restored by 8. And then... Oh, okay. I don't... Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, no,
what do
it
we
is.
think? What
It's,
does it sound like in the ruling?
yeah, no, it's just the D8. It's only with the 2 that you do.
Just
Cause
D8.
because I mean, if you think for that 7 hit, that's 21 hit points you've healed people in total, so it's pretty powerful in that sense. Or 28 including yourself if
Okay.
you had any damage.
Okay, instead of that, I will just cast that onto.
Zonk?
Oh, Christ.
Or,
Yeah.
so
How's Jim looking?
he's still looking pretty bloody from the earlier.
Yeah. I'm wondering if just a collective 8 to heal everyone would be nice, or whether. Do you know what? No, I'm just on Zonk would be great.
Cool. So Zonk recovers 15 hit points.
Yeah.
So Zonk, you sort of come back into the world. There's this bear leaning over you, and in a moment you'll get to react. Jim.
I've got one thingy, one action.
Oh, you have. Sorry, yes, because you
yeah,
changed.
That's
Yeah.
right. I'm just going to see what else I've got up my sleeve to try and aid what the hell is happening here. Do you know what? I'm going to step in, if that's okay. I'm going to step to here.
Yeah. It's a good thing, automatic attack of opportunities don't exist anymore.
That's what I figured, but I'm going to step in.
It is still a risk. You notice the bear doesn't try and bite you, though. Because, it could be a total party kill otherwise. After that, we then do have Jim, currently on 3 hit points, Jim, and there is an angry bear staring you in the face.
Can I pull out my crossbow, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, you can. You can draw your crossbow.
And perhaps dive under.
So what was that? You cracked up. So draw your crossbow and then...
Dive under the cart.
Okay, so you're going to move to go under the cart. Okay, so you come round. So you've still got one action left. You can attempt to try and shoot from there if you like. You'll take some negatives, but you can attempt to try and shoot the bear. So D20 plus...
I think I'll leave it for now.
You're going to leave it. That's fine. So you're just sort of cowering, going underneath this cart. After that, we then have Zonk. Currently, you're lying on the ground with
Actually,
this...
no, I will.
You got to, yeah.
Yeah, might as well. So that will be...
Yeah.
It's going to take you a while to reload this once you've shot it. But you... Yep, so 1d20 plus 6. There'll be a negative, but I'll calculate that for you.
It's a 9.
Unfortunately, even though this bear is huge compared to you, you try and shoot it. There's wagon wheel in the way. There's Asher and her. I really cannot get that name stuck in my head. The scythe sort of dancing around. There's this flying healing spells going off. There's all this sort of chaos that you just manage to sort of glance it off the. Even with the bonus, it will miss. Unfortunately, I'd assumed that I'd added that in. So even with the 19, unfortunately, it won't manage to hit because of the bonuses the bear's getting. Because he's within 30 foot, you take a -1 on an attack roll straight away, which is much better than the Pathfinder First Edition -4 you got if people were in melee. And then he's got slight cover from the fact that obviously shooting from a lying down position whilst under a cart. So yeah, made it slightly harder. You weren't far off hitting, I have to admit. You only needed to get to an 11 and you would have got a hit. But yeah, so you fired off this crossbow and just sort of the bear, unfortunately, somehow misses. It glances off the wheel and doesn't strike true. Doesn't damage the cart, though. After that, we then have Zonk. You are currently lying down.
I think that Zonk opens his eyes from being almost dead.
Yep.
And then he is like, nope. He closes them again and he pretends to be dead.
Epic.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so it is then the bear's turn. The bear is going to attack the thing that... I mean, I can't remember how long lasts. It lasts bloody forever in 2nd edition, I think.
Yeah, it's still glowing.
So there's this crazy woman with a glowing sword. All these strange lights have come out of it. You've drawn the attention of the bear. I'm not going to use the dice that rolled a natural 20. I'm a little bit scared of killing off. However, I think it's still a critical success. With a 29 to hit.
Who's that hitting?
That's hitting
Yeah,
Aisha.
that's a critical success.
That's hitting Asher. So fucking hell. How many hit points have you got?
12.
Shit. I mean, you're unconscious.
Oh my god.
We'll just see how long. I mean, at least this isn't first edition where you would just be outright dead. So that's 17, 19, 25 points of damage, which puts you down to dying 2.
Oh my god.
Noticing that a thing came out from underneath the wagon, it is going to try and take a swipe down at Jim, but it is going to take quite a significant penalty to do so. And with a 6 plus 7, it will miss Jim. In frustration, it's going to try again. This is just a straight roll. So that is luckily a 9. It rolled off a 19, which would have hit, even with the -2 or the bonus 2 AC from being behind cover that I'd given Jim. So very luckily, these 2 swipes. He does slightly damage the wagon wheel. Reynard, can you make a perception check for me, please?
Yeah. 22.
You notice that suddenly the bear sort of swipes down towards Jim, but then sort of looks round towards you. And whatever was clouding its eyes, whatever was causing it to do it, it suddenly appears very docile and very different, and it sits down on its haunches.
Bardolph. What have you done? What have you done?
It at that moment it looks around and looks down at Zonk. It looks down at Asher, and sort of notices Jim cowering under the underneath, and it sort of it sort of looks at you in sort of desperation and confusion, and sort of goes to poke very gently. It quite clearly isn't trying to injure. Pokes Zonk with its claw. Does Zonk react in any way?
Zonk kinda like backs away, because I don't think that Zonk with his eyes closed is already realizing that the fight is over, so he backs away, scared.
Yeah.
Scared.
Do you open your eyes as a result, or?
Yeah. I'll open my eyes. I'll notice that the fight is over, and I'll be a bit gobsmacked.
Yeah. So you do notice that Bardolph just sort of is trying to poke you, making sure he hasn't killed you. At this moment, we still have Asher like bleeding out on the floor. Can you make a check for me, please, to try and recover, which is a D10 plus 2 flat roll.
No, D20, I think.
D20, sorry, DC 12, sorry. So D20, I meant language.
D20 plus 2?
No, D20 flat roll. You've got to beat a 12 or meet it. So unfortunately, you do move to dying 3. You notice that just as she's lying there, you notice this splatter of blood come sort of zooming out of Asher's mouth. Anything you guys wish to do? She doesn't have long left to live.
Zonk, Jim, help me with this. Come on, Asher, help me with this. I'll beckon them all over, and we'll see if we can assist one another in helping stabilise her.
I mean, yeah, you've got 2 options. You can either try and aid, which is a DC 20, or you can all roll a medicine check each. You could use a hero point to do a D20 plus a D6 as a sort of a last ditch.
I'll use my hero point to increase my medicine check.
Yep. So
increase by 5. So this is my my dice plus 9 on my medicine check. No, the natural one.
What?
How are you gonna die?
No. So that does.
It's a 10, so I got a flat 10 adjusted 10.
Okay. I don't know if at this point, because that's a critical fail, because as you got a natural 1, it still reduces it from a fail to a critical fail. Does Asher want to spend a hero point? Because otherwise Asher is dead.
You'll spend a hero point.
Oh, good God. So Reynard tries to rush over and sort of tries to close this big gaping hole, but as he does so, his hand slips in and just rips one of the arteries, and he's left with part of it in his hand, and you just suddenly see spurts of blood just going out of everywhere.
Jim, it's Jim. Help me with this.
And then in that moment, there just seems to be a divine calm comes over the area, and who would have thought character death session 1? At that point, just this divine calm, and suddenly and miraculously, Asher just seems to be unconscious.
Oh, hero point well spent now.
Yeah, critical.
Hey, it worked. Well done, Reynard.
Yeah. Okay.
Pathetic. Nice.
These hands. They've never done something like that before.
At that moment, the professor comes running out and sort of, oh, what was? Oh, Jesus Christ! Pharasma Christ! And sort of disappears back off and comes back out holding several vials and just pours one down straight down Asher's throat, and sort of passes another one to Jim and passes another one to Reynard, noticing you all look a bit fucked up, and then sort of after doing the first one down Asher's throat again does the same, and I believe off the top of my head they do a D6 of healing.
Okay. So we get 2d6, is that right?
Sorry, I think it's just a straight 6. I'm just going to double check.
I'm on -13 at the moment, if that helps.
You're not technically. That no longer exists. You were dying 4. You're now just at 0.
Right, okay.
This is one of the major mechanical changes between first and second. There's no negative on the con score. You don't track past 0. You go onto a completely different.
Dying 1, dying 2,
yeah.
dying 4.
So it's
Dave.
like
The thing is, when you were dying and you get up again by means of magic healing, or what Reynard just did, then you get a wounded condition. And so I have wounded 1 now, I think. And that means if I go to dying again, that my wounded value is added to my dying value straight away. So if you get up and you go down and go up, go down, after a while you'll just die from one hit.
Which is
okay, I get it.
Yeah, one of those ones where obviously the critical hit can take you, if you're at wounded 2, you are dead. Because you go straight to dying 4.
But with medicine you can do the treat wounds thing, that's 10 minutes. Then you can heal a bit and you remove the wounded condition.
Yeah. Yeah. Denton, did you find out if it was a flat 6?
No, so it's a 1d8.
1d8.
I'm crossing. There's too many different game rules I play now. So 2d8 for Asher, 1d8 for Jim, and 1d8 for Reynard.
Okay, so I'll try and bandage my symptoms. I'll spend a while, the next 10 minutes or so bandaging myself up.
Cool.
I'm not too
Can you attempt a treat wounds check for me, please? D20 plus medicine.
Hard off, I must treat these wounds. So So a D20 plus medicine, yeah.
Yeah.
13.
Unfortunately, you fail to treat your wounds. However, you don't critically fail by a long shot. It is Zeke. Was that you get a 3 of healing on the D8?
Okay.
Okay, so you're back up to 6 hit points at least.
You guys are going to be the death of me.
Yep. Is there any, do you, I mean, you can spend some time now to recover. You notice during this time that Bardolph is literally just sat on his haunches and is not even daring to move, and is just sort of waiting for any kind of instruction.
So
Am I conscious again? Sorry.
Oh yeah. You're now conscious. You're currently at wounded 2. Sorry. You're
What HP am I on?
No, you haven't got wounded because you spent a hero point. You're currently on 15 hit points, or whatever, 2d8. So what have you rolled for that to recover?
Okay, I'll do that now. I rolled a double 1. So I'm on 2 hit
You're on
points.
2 hit points, yes, but you
Nice.
don't have the wounded condition, so you won't at least die outright.
I will cast. Can I just cast my final spell of the day on myself? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to cast heal, and obviously I can use 2 actions to cast that on myself.
Yep.
Which means it's 1d8
Plus 8.
I rolled an 8. Okay, so I'm back to full health.
You're easily back. Yeah, you sort of notice your skill with the healing is far better than what these potions seem to do.
It appears Pharasma does not want me on this day.
To die again. So yeah, sort of. You've noticed that something had happened to Bardolph, but it seems to have been rectified. There's only one other thing that you notice inside the actual wagon, as I assume you searched there.
Yeah.
There appears to be an owlbear claw hanging from the back. It's not a nefarious item. It's being used as some sort of dream catcher in the wagon. There's no evidence of any other foul play. It doesn't even look like the rats went inside the wagon. The tracks seem to stop outside the wagon.
Whose wagon is this?
It's literally Bardolph's the bear's wagon.
Okay.
It is only for him.
Asha, you said that vipers would normally not bite somebody, like what happened with Myron.
That's
right?
correct. I fear that they must have been provoked in order to do this.
Could it be something magical?
Quite possibly. I'm suggesting more primitive foul play, as in an agitated snake, perhaps. Maybe hidden somewhere, or put in a basket that he frequents, or something like that, possibly.
I'm getting a bit scared because wasn't Master Tickles acting strange as well? Is Elysia maybe? Is she safe? I'm going to look around because a lot of the other performers are here as well. They were around the campfire.
Yeah, everyone else is literally hanging out by the campfire. There are no performers or even other staff, except for the professor that's sort of stood with you at this point, that are doing anything.
I'm suspecting major foul play here.
Major foul play?
I do have to call it there, by the way.
Yeah, no.
I'm really sorry.
I was going to end it at this point. It just sort of tipped into that combat at the last minute.
And then me nearly dying.
And then you nearly died. I don't know if in any way sort of you managed to record anything, Luke, at all. Or if it was a complete failure to record.
He might have gone.
Yeah, he's muted himself again.
Unfortunately, not. No, it would
No,
have been
that's
without
fine.
voice otherwise.
Ah.
Did you not manage on yours?
No, every time I tried, it crapped out. So
Right.
it's unfortunate. Hopefully, we know we can record the next one and see what happens. But you know, it's what happens. So
Yeah, I'll try and record the audio at least, and then you can release it at least as audio. I suppose.
Yeah.
That's probably.
I'll have a play around. There's obviously some setting that when we were trying to fix the main issue, we've obviously lucked out on, but it will be recorded on Twitch anyway, won't it?
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that was
where we finished.
yeah. So
It was really nice.
yeah, it was. I'm quite impressed at how much we did and how far we got through things, and yeah, it was utterly hilarious at points. So yep,
More thugs, less bears, please.
we'll just slink off this whole campaign idea and just literally become a travelling circus. It seemed safer, but yeah, no, that was really great, and I hope everyone had fun, and
Yes.
Yeah, it did definitely.
yeah, thanks, and is everyone able to do the next game date of I think was the 2nd?
And yeah.
Yeah, it should be alright with me. Yeah.
I had my last exam today, so I'm free.
Well done. Hope it
Awesome,
went very
yeah.
well for the
Yeah, I hope it went well.
Good luck on the exams, yeah. yeah.
Fantastic.
Right,
Bye, guys.
right. Bye all.
See you later.
See you later.
See
Cheers.
you later.
See you, Jim Dinton.
Bye.